Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. I'm Councillor James Caston and I'm chairing the meeting today. I'll first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure mobile phones and laptops and other electronic devices are on silent. We'll be using e-voting in the meeting. Please make sure you're signed in to modern.gov. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately via the fire exits and make your way to the assembly point on the Ipswich Town football grounds. Following the signs directing you to the fire exits. Do not enter the atrium. If you were in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts, and do not re-enter the building unless you're told it's safe to do so. So, we'll start with the item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Osborne and Councillor Baker. So we have Councillor McLaren substituting for Councillor Osborne and Councillor Matheson substituting for Councillor Baker. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any? No. Item 3, which is to confirm the minutes of the joint meeting held on the 13th of October 2025. Are there any issues? Everyone's had the chance to look at those minutes. Are there any issues? No. Could I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor Scarf, and a seconder, Councillor Rowe. Right. What we'll do is we'll do a show of hands vote for this. So all in favour of those joint meeting minutes? Yeah, that's carried. Right, so item 4 is for Mid-Suffolk members only. It's to confirm the minutes of the Mid-Suffolk meeting held on the 15th of December 2025. Are there any issues regarding those minutes? No. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Patchett and a seconder, Councillor Piper. Right, and a show of hands for the Mid-Suffolk members for that. Yeah, so that's carried, unanimous. Right, so now item 5 is just for Babergh members. The minutes of the Babergh meeting held on the 29th of January 2026. Are there any points regarding those minutes? Don't see any hands. Could I have a proposer, Councillor Holt, and a seconder, Councillor Carruthers? Yeah. Thank you. And a show of hands, all in favour. I think that's unanimous with everyone that was there. Right, okay. So item 6, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Item 7, questions from the public.
None received.
Item 8, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 9, which is JOS 2519, Council Housing Assurance Report. What I'd like to do is, for the officers, well, for everyone back there that's part of this item, if we could go from left to right and you could introduce yourself and just say your position. Thank you.
Good morning, Mandeep Bogle, Interim Director of Housing.
Richard Winch, Cabinet Member for Housing for Mid-Suffolk.
David White, Head of Housing Transformation and Regulation.
Councillor Ruth Hendry, Portfolio Holder for Housing for Babergh.
Yeah, he's only been in a few weeks, so That's perfect. Thank you. We're very glad to have you here. Is David? Are you? Yeah, you're introducing, please.
So this is the second council housing assurance report that the committee have seen. So you are now able to scrutinise Q1 to Q3's housing performance information. You will see within the committee report as well an update on recommendations made by the committee last time. And we're happy to take any comments from the committee around our performance or anything that you'd like to know more about.
Right, thank you very much. Are we ready to... Councillor Winch.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of words, and a little bit of context, which I'm sure David's been through before, and that is there's a social housing regulator now who is carrying out inspections of social housing organisations, and we're due to get an inspection probably in the first half of this year. And we'll get a grade from C1 to C4. And what the housing team and David in particular has done here is try and structure a report around the main areas that an inspector might look at. So it's to try and give us all the visibility of where we're good and where we're not so good, but an anticipation of this regulatory regime. So really, from a cabinet point of view, this is a really, really important report for us, because it's how we can tell whether we're okay or not.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to questions. I'll kick off with a question, if that's all right. On page 45, percentage of rent due collected 12 months rolling, excluding current arrears brought forward for Babergh and Mid Suffolk. I worked out for Mid Suffolk that that's about 24,274. I don't know if that's right, but it's a certain amount of money. But the way that's worded in there, does that mean that potentially that 24,000 may come in, but might never come onto this as a percentage?
Yeah, so that particular performance information figure is as of the 31st of December. We collect that, as it said in the description, it's a 12-month rolling. So by the end of March, you would expect to see that at 100% or more. So yeah, I think as I've said in the commentary, that is around about where you would expect it to be, with 3 months left of the year to go. It's interesting that members have picked this up as one of the measures they want to look at, because we're actually thinking that you shouldn't really have to do those calculations yourself. We should probably look at some other performance indicators in regards to rent collection. So that is one of the first things my colleague, the Head of Housing Management, will be doing. In the next report, there will be some different performance indicators for members to help scrutinise rent collection.
Because I don't know whether this is actually how it is, but it seems to me like on the 2 days after that quarter, that 24,000 could land in the bank account, and it would never be. You couldn't put it in the next one because you're not carrying it forward, but you couldn't. It looks worse than it is generally, but that's exactly what you're saying. That metric will change.
Yeah, so you can see what the percentage was at quarter 4 of last year. So obviously for Mid Suffolk it was 100.31%. So it was over the 100%, and that's to do with how we now ensure that we're taking rent on time at the start of a tenancy. So we never used to do that, but we have now started to take at least a week's rent at the point of signing somebody up, and that's to ensure that their rent account stays in credit as much as possible. And obviously rent is due every Monday, so if we weren't taking that rent, you're automatically in rent arrears as soon as you've signed your tenancy agreement. So that's something that we've introduced as of last year, which is why the percentage is over 100%.
Yeah, that's it, because I thought it's quite a lot of money for an accidental overpayment of rent or something like that. So yeah, thank you for explaining that. Right, I'll go to the committee now. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Patchett.
Well, then I'll kick it off. Again, just an early observation, really, which would be on page, it's showing up as 45. That it looks like we've hit 100% of repairs completed within our timelines. I guess, so what has happened? Have we got really good at repairing houses quickly, or have we shifted the timelines? I guess would be my immediate question.
So the member is correct. We have achieved 100% of emergency repairs within time. So that's within 24 hours. We may do some of those repairs earlier than 24 hours, but we have an emergency timescale of 24 hours. So no, we haven't changed the timescale. We have, just as part of the improvements to the housing repairs service, but also the improvements to reporting through the Total Mobile Connect system that we've implemented, we're now able to give you a much more accurate picture as to how quickly we're doing repairs. So the only area that we're currently not meeting target on is for our urgent category. Now, not all providers have an urgent category, which is for 5 working days. Yeah, but work is ongoing with that to help that to hit target.
Thank you. Any further? So on page 48, you've got percentage of emergency hazards resolved within 24 hours. Is that meant to say resolved, or is that responded to? Because it seems like incredibly ambitious to have them resolved in 24 hours, especially where damp and mould are concerned.
Yeah, so that is actually the Arab's Law requirement. So as of 27th of October last year, all social housing landlords are expected to resolve hazards within 24 hours. Now, with regards to damp and mould, that resolution, if it was really, really bad, could look like decanting a tenant from their home and putting them into a safe property. That would be classed as resolved within 24 hours. It could also be that we go and do a clean of that mould, if, for example, so that again would be resolved. What it doesn't then specify is obviously there's obviously a cause for that mould, so we would then have to investigate, look into that, understand what it is, and we have up to 12 weeks to carry out those repairs, you know, afterward, subsequent repairs afterwards that we might find. So, for example, if it's to do with insulation or, you know, a leak or something like that, then we would obviously try to get those resolved in time as well. But yes, that is correct. It is challenging, but that is the law.
So resolved on there could mean you've taken the risk away, or reduced the risk to very little.
Yes, correct. And the reason we're not at target, which I think I've explained in the commentary, is because our new, we've got new damp and mould contractors. The first one is, we've got 2 contractors. So one does our kind of inspections and immediate responses. And then the second one does any subsequent repairs. And obviously that's quite a unique way of setting it up, but it also means that your damp and mould contractor who's inspecting your repairs can't just write their own checks and say you need all of this work doing. It's actually, you know, somebody else that will be doing the work. The reason we haven't hit target this time is because the damp and mould contractor is reporting to us on the percentage of properties that they've managed to get into. However, what that measure is also explaining is if a tenant refuses us to come back, or we say we want to come back tomorrow morning, for example, and they say, well, sorry, I'm not going to be in, can you come on Thursday instead? That's fine within the law, so because you've given the tenants the choice and they've chosen not to come in. So that's where that discrepancy comes from. But actually that should be 100% compliant because we have made an attempt within 24 hours to access all of those homes. So what we're doing is we're working with the contractor to try and get both of those performance indicators sorted out, because obviously we need to know where we've got to and where we haven't, but also we need to be able to report to members and tenants whether we're compliant or not with the legislation. So we didn't want to just massage this figure and put in 100% because it is compliant. We wanted to go with, you know, be honest, transparent, and go with what the report was telling us.
Councillor Rowe, please.
Yeah, so in my ward, there's housing we have which is on the road which hasn't been adopted by Suffolk Council. I've been contacted by tenants who basically, like, the housing might be up to standard, but because of disability, they aren't able to actually get out of the house very easily because there's massive great drop curbs. So I was wondering whether there's a way to keep track of what houses are on roads that haven't been adopted by Suffolk County Council, because that usually is a sign that developers haven't actually finished the road bits. Because I know other residents then end up complaining to the developer, and I'm talking about a situation which has been going on for years, and so that would potentially be a time when we'd need to also be kind of engaging with the developer from, not just from the planning side, but because we have houses that are needing and are kind of providing housing for people who sometimes have quite a lot of extra needs.
Yeah, so is this about council-owned housing? Yes. So we'd need to take that away and speak to our assets and development team about that, because it's not something that you know, we just manage the property and the tenancy, you know, and the tenants within it from a housing management perspective, obviously. So yeah, I think we'd need to ask our assets team if there's some, you know, what's the level of service that we should expect there. How, you know, I think that we all know that the sort of highways can work towards their own timescale. So I'm not really sure what that looks like, but yeah, we can pick that up. But it wouldn't be something that we'd include necessarily in this report, because that isn't helping us to evidence that we're compliant with the consumer standards and the social housing regulations. But of course, it's an important, you know, and especially if it's impacting on a vulnerable tenant who is unable to get out of their home, there may be some adaptations that we can make to that home or to that area in consultation with the highways team.
Yeah, and it's not just highways, it's because essentially it's where developers have not finished and they've now not around, and although they're saying they're going to finish it, there's not any timescales for it. So it's just not just Suffolk County Council or highways. I just use that example of a way that would kind of be a way to possibly highlight without getting into too much detail, if you see what I mean.
I think Councillor Winch would like.
Yeah, it was really a question. Is this recent council house acquisition?
No, I think it's been there for like about 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, one to take away. Now we've got Councillor Patchett, followed by Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Jed. This is really one about our mechanisms of how we communicate with our tenants when they put a complaint in. So I think when I spoke to the others beforehand, none of us were actually 100% sure what that mechanism was. So is it an online form that we do? Can they send you an email? Is it a phone call? I imagine it's all three. But then once that complaint's come in, what's the mechanism going forward of how we communicate with them? Because again, I think I was explaining to the others when I had an insurance claim, which it was done on a portal scheme. So you log in, and what's really good about a portal scheme is that actually you can have individual lines for individual departments. You can have a line for MSDC, but also the plumber, the builder, the electrician, and then everyone is informed and everyone can kind of individually communicate with that customer. So I wonder, can we actually display like a test version up on the screen so we can actually see if there is a portal or a form? Can we actually see it, please? Because we were all actually unsure of the mechanism, basically. Thanks.
Yeah, so if we're talking about sort of complaint specifically, so not a request for service, so not a complaint about repairs or anything like that. Okay, so we don't have an online portal for tenants at the moment with Total Mobile Connect. There is a functionality there, but we chose not to use it at this time, and because we fed back to Total Mobile that it wasn't fit for purpose, because it was very cumbersome and not very quite confusing. They have taken that feedback on board along with a load of other clients of theirs who told them exactly the same thing. Once they have made those developments, we will then be launching that that portal to our tenants, but that will only be about logging repairs. So we can certainly, we've got a video demonstration of that recorded that we could share with members, that's not a problem. In terms of complaints, obviously we have, complaints are managed by our corporate services team, so our tenants see exactly the same service, that receive the same service as our residents do when they're making a complaint about whatever they might be making a complaint about. So yes, and you're correct, they can send an email to the feedback email address, they can phone in the customer services team, can then log it for them. They can create an account, I believe, on our online platform, and then again they will be able to see exactly similar to what you're talking about, I think, like a sort of a complaint, where it is in the process. And yeah, and again, I would need to ask a colleague in the corporate customer services team to give you a demo of how that looks to a resident or a tenant.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Chair. So what determines whether a hazard is recorded as an emergency or urgent? I mean, is that done by an algorithm or is that done by a customer service rep based on guidelines that you have? Because obviously whether it's recorded as an emergency or urgent will affect your scores and the service.
I'll take that, Councillor, thank you. In specific to damp and mould, there is a calculation that's used in the sector called HHSRS, which is the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. It's a set of 12 areas that we technically, or an assessor, would technically survey the property on, and then we then receive the outcome of that technical assessment. If the hazards are denoted to category 1, it stipulates us to remove that hazard within 24 hours. And that's what my colleague was talking about earlier around that's where we resolve the initial hazard. And it may be therefore the remediation works thereafter take some time to bring that property back up to spec. But that immediate hazard has been removed, so it potentially could be, generally it's explained by harmful to serious harm to health. So we are working towards quite a technical specification and assessment, and that's the data there that you're getting around the jobs that are resolved within 24 hours. But as David said, there's generally and usually a lot of work that follows on subsequently to that.
So if the tenant reports a damp and mould issue, it doesn't get deemed emergency until we go out and do a survey, is that right?
And the new law, yes. Yeah. And the new law stipulates that we need to go out within 24 hours as well. Right. So when a query is raised, we try and receive as much information as possible at that early stage to diagnose whether it's on the phone or someone's come to see us. But it's at that technical survey inspection at that 24 hours, in that 24-hour window, is when we are able to identify how severe the hazard is or not, and then take relevant action.
So we have 24 hours to go out and survey it, and then 24 hours to resolve it on top of that, is that right?
24 hours to resolve the immediate hazard.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. On page 58, we see stage 1 complaints acknowledged within 5 working days. When I read that, there's 2 different numbers for Babergh and with Suffolk. But I understand sovereign councils, but the housing directorate is actually one team, and the managers are the same, presumably, for both. Can you explain why there's that difference? And of course, you're not really reaching your target on that, are you? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. We are working with the corporate customer services team at the moment to look at the report, because the way the report calculates whether or not we've acknowledged a complaint in time is by looking at basically text matching to say that we've, because obviously the Ombudsman states quite clearly in the legislation what an acknowledgement needs to look like. So you need to have read the complaint, you need to have understood what it's about, you need to have understood what it is that the tenant would like to put it right. So if you haven't done all of that, then that's not technically, and I'm not counting it as being properly formally acknowledged. So we are looking at the report at the moment, but the report, as I said, is looking at, so if somebody writes something slightly different in their acknowledgement, it's not counting it as done. So yeah, I suspect our performance is actually much better than that. And the only reason in my opinion, the only reason the complaint shouldn't be acknowledged within 5 working days is if it's got stuck somewhere within the system and somebody's not reallocated it. It was sent to the wrong team, for example. So yeah, that's why we've set that target at 90%, because there isn't really much of a reason why we shouldn't be acknowledging within 5 working days. But as I said, we're working to look at the report. Once we get assurance that that report is actually working correctly, we will retrospectively update our performance with that.
And Councillor Winch would like to follow in.
This is one of the most frustrating figures on this report, because when I get the report, I scan down and look for the red items, which is probably what you guys have done as well. And this is something which I think we all collectively agree we really should be able to get on top of. And we're hoping that the numbers, I mean, they have improved a bit over the last quarter, but it's something we really hoping we can get there soon.
Would you like to come back, Councillor McLaren? Another question, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Page 60, which is the satisfaction score around antisocial behaviour. I mean, I've had a lung problem, not me personally, but why is that so low? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is based on a transactional survey that we carry out with anybody who's had an antisocial behaviour case closed within a month. So in February, we will ask everyone who had a case closed if they want to fill in a survey if they had a case closed in January. Now, these figures fluctuate. As you can imagine, not everybody is maybe satisfied with the way that the antisocial behaviour has been handled. A lot of it comes back down to managing people's expectations around what is reasonable and proportionate, because that is ultimately the kind of measure stick that we have to abide by. And in this particular case, we'd only actually had one response to that survey. So within the whole quarter, all the cases that were closed in that quarter, only one person chose to respond to the satisfaction survey. That person was obviously not very satisfied, so therefore we captured it at 0%. So it's a bit of a kind of a crude measure, but it's something that we've included because we feel it's important. It's our tenant voice, and we do try to follow up with people as well when they say they're dissatisfied, to understand what we can do better and how we can improve that. Obviously, members will know, based on the antisocial behaviour scrutiny project that the tenants directed us to do last year, we've got around 60% of that action plan completed, and we're hoping to have the remaining 40% of those scrutiny recommendations by our tenants completed within the next 3 or 4 months. So we're hoping that that will also then have a knock-on effect in terms of increasing tenant satisfaction with antisocial behaviour.
Sorry, I've turned over my page and I haven't. I think it's Councillor Piper next.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to damp and mould. The damp and mould hazards. Is that increase, do you think that increase is driven by maybe retrofitting of like non-breathable insulation in houses?
No, so obviously this is quarter-3 performance, so you would expect it to damp and mould to increase between the months of September and December. So no, I don't think it is. I've got no evidence to suggest it is that. We do know, obviously we have had some properties where we've put in supposedly more efficient heating systems, but then not taking a fabric-first approach with that property historically, which has then meant that the heating isn't working as efficiently as it needs to. And excess cold is also one of the housing health and safety rated hazards that we are supposed to adhere to. So if there is a property with excess cold, then yes, of course, that might be exacerbating any damp and mould issues. But no, that you expect it to go up at this time of year, the number of damp and mould cases.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson and then Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. Yeah, coming back to this business of communications, people want to know what's going on, and I suppose that that's also an issue inside the organisation that where staff are working part-time, working from home 4 days a week and so on, they need to be able to pick up what someone else has been doing. And I mean, it seems, as with Councillor Patchett, the attractions of the portal approach seem to be calling out to me a bit. And I wonder to some extent whether actually expectations are rising, because you can now track your parcel like as it turns off the A14 to come down into town, literally, but that is to some extent what people expect now, but yeah, I think that it's disappointing that what we got wasn't very good and it wasn't implemented, which is presumably the right decision not to use that which is found to not be very good. But still, that looks like that's a way forward to me. Matching more the automation of it. That when something changes, something happens. That it automatically triggers a text or something, like the NHS is like that, isn't it? Whether that's part of the way forward in terms of get communications better.
Yeah, so I can answer part of that. So Total Mobile Connect, whilst we aren't using the portal to log repairs for tenants, it does provide text messages. So you get a text message as soon as you've logged an appointment. You get a reminder text message the day before to tell you that we're still coming. You also get a text message to say that we're on our way. So tenants can, and then after the repair, you also get a text message asking you to complete a satisfaction survey with that repair. So you get quite a modern service, and you get 4 text messages basically per repair, or an email if we don't have a mobile number for you. So that part of it is fine, and that works really, really well. What I would also do is preface that next month, members, you will be hearing from our tenant board, who have recently carried out a scrutiny project on communication specifically. So you will hear from them next month around their recommendations around how we can address issues with communication. But as a little sort of sneak preview, they did also pick up that there is an issue internally with communication, not just communication between ourselves and our residents, but also between departments. And as I said, we've got and contractors as well. So yeah, again, we've got some recommendations in place that the tenants have asked for. So we'll be looking at seeing how we can make those things happen to improve communication.
Yes, just one little part of that. So I think what I'm thinking of to some extent is it's the problem that drags on for a bit. The problem where you can't get the parts and so on, where it would be particularly helpful if everybody, whether the officers, contractors, tenants, can look and see, well, we're still waiting for that part kind of stuff. That's I think I was speaking more than the. I mean, it's great that the text messages are going out to the extent that they are. Thank you.
And I feel there might be a bit of a recommendation just starting to come up in there if we want it. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 63 on the neighbourhood and tenancy section 4, the second table there, number of hate incidents reported, it goes up in the third quarter of 2025 in both Babergh and Mid-Suffolk, higher is it in Mid-Suffolk? Yeah. What are the reasons for that? Are there differences in reporting, or is it anything to do with national stuff? Don't know.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, and apologies. It wasn't noticed until after the report was submitted, but the eagle-eyed members amongst you might have noticed that it's exactly the same number for antisocial behaviour cases. So it's actually an error in the input. The number of hate crime cases, as you would expect, is very similar to what it was last quarter, and this will be corrected, so apologies for that. It will be corrected before it goes to Cabinet, but yeah. This is also another reason why it's very useful to for overview and scrutiny to see these reports, because it helps identify those mistakes, those human errors.
Chair, if I may, it's if I can also just answer the earlier part of your question. It's to do with how we're now categorising antisocial behaviour. Essentially, prior we would have just put all of the cases, including hate crime, under an ASB banner. We are now directed to remove those and have a separate category and manage those cases again with a different timescale. And so what you'll see is these will be separated out in the report as opposed to being put into the air.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patchett, but first, if you're sitting on any questions, please book them in now and I'll get you in the list.
Happy for me to go, Chair? Yeah. So, yeah, again, looking at our timeframes, repair timeframes from page 44, they're looking really good. They're trending upwards, and there's been some quite big leaps in those trends. So I guess my question is, has there been some kind of like a panacea or silver bullet in the last 18 months that has gone, this has absolutely helped us to sort of nail these percentages? So that's one question. And also, is there one particular type of repair, for example, like leaky windows or, kitchen, is there one particular kind of repair that is a particular sticking point for us that is quite tricky, that's maybe, holding our percentages back, essentially? So is there one particular type of, like windows and kitchens, is there one particular thing that actually, that's a sticking point for us and that we need to kind of then focus in on? But well done for the upward trend, though, and the big leaps.
Yeah, so no, there's never a silver bullet, but the upward trend is because of obviously the transformation that the service has been through, the improved reporting, so being able to more accurately report on, we were reporting really poor figures before because of the way that our operatives' devices worked, and if they didn't close a job off, then we couldn't retrospectively go back and say they'd done it in time. So there's that element to it. But as far as I'm aware, I'm not head of housing repairs and maintenance, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't any specific jobs. Obviously, as part of the transformation of the service, we have got good availability. We can also see where our operatives are all the time. The beauty of the Total Mobile Connect system is it's dynamic, so it will shift people around, so it helps us to be more efficient. When a customer logs a job, it might go to a tradesperson on day one, but that tradesperson could change, several times by the time it actually comes to that person doing the work, because we're constantly making that route more efficient for the repairs team. So that's why our repairs performance has improved significantly. And we're actually looking at other things that our repairs operatives can do. So because of this, we've built some capacity now within the team.
So I guess the follow-up to that is that, the introduction of that sort of system that you're speaking about, if you look at the kind of cost versus performance of it, that's been really good value for money for the council and obviously taxpayers.
Yes, I believe so. The other, I suppose, figure that we don't include in here is the works in progress number, so the number of jobs that we have open at any one time. We've actually reduced that from around 7,000 before the transformation to, which, roughly around 3,500 per district. And we've actually reduced that down to under 500 jobs per district in the WIP, the works in progress. So again, more efficient and absolutely value for money based on the system we've got.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jameson.
Thanks. On page 51, the percent homes that do not meet the decent homes standard is, we're progressing in the right direction. We certainly, each quarter we are getting better, but we're still a long way off the 1% target. Is that because of the type of work involved to make those homes decent, or is there some other issue that's affecting that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is actually something that we've been working quite closely with the regulator on as well. It was the hot topic at our annual engagement meeting. So we have an engagement meeting every year with the regulator at least once. And this was an area for them. We're reporting quite high levels of non-decent properties. There are a couple of factors to that. One, that we actually know what our property's condition is, because we've done over 80% stock condition. Members may see that number fluctuate throughout the next few months as well, because we have targeted ourselves to continue with the stock condition and get the remaining 19% of properties surveyed. So obviously we don't know what condition those 19% are in at the moment. So that may fluctuate the numbers a little bit. And then what we've also done is any Category 1 HHSRS issues that are identified as part of those surveys, they've been addressed straight away. So that's why you'll see the numbers sort of come down and then sort of plateau out. A lot of the work that's required to make these properties decent is to do with thermal comfort and efficient heating systems. So we have now onboarded 2 new insulation contractors. And again, we're working through we're working to onboard that contractor and get those works carried out, which will again further reduce that. We've also done a piece of work. Now we know who our tenants are and we know what their vulnerabilities are. We've got around 80% complete tenant data now. We've matched those tenants. Any tenants with a vulnerability, we've matched them against our stock profile. So we've said this person is vulnerable and also living in a non-decent property for thermal comfort issues. And we've made direct contact with those tenants to make sure that they're okay, to ask them if there's any support that we can give them in the interim while we're waiting for their works to be carried out. And we've also promised to prioritise those tenants for their insulation works when the contractor gets going. So as soon as the contract starts, those tenants who we know are vulnerable and in need of that work will be done first. They'll come to the top of the list.
So as that contractor comes on board, could we potentially see a sudden drop in that?
Yes, I'll let Councillor Winch come in, but there is a plan you'll see under the commentary section for safety and quality. It says by the end of 25-26 financial year, we anticipate us to be around 12.8% non-decent. By the end of Q1 next year, or this year, it should be around 10%. So you will start to see that reduce.
Yeah, David's just mentioned the main point. I was going to say that this is one of the most significant red items on the report, because it really is quite a major issue. If you look at the Q4 2024, we were assuming we had 7.7% non-decent homes. It's by going out to all the properties and surveying them, we've then found out our housing stock is actually a lot worse than the assumption we were working on. And getting on top of that, there is a plan to get on top of that. It isn't something you can do in a week or two, because it requires a lot of major work in a lot of different properties. But I think we're very confident that this is really being viewed as a major issue and there is a realistic plan in place to get on top of it.
Thank you. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Page 59, transactional satisfaction scores on move-in. It appears, speaking on Mid-Suffolk's behalf, it appears that the figures jump up and down an awful lot. With the latest figure, an improvement in Q3 as opposed to Q2. The narrative tells us that satisfaction with the condition of our homes on letting has reduced over the last quarter. This is being addressed with our contractors, so that's the first point. And we are also not handing properties over to be let with major works required after occupation. this will negatively impact on void times and therefore rent loss, but should provide a better experience for our tenants. I can remember some years ago we had a fixation on void times where they were really poor. And the answer was to that, okay, let's let tenants move in and there'll still be works required when they move in, and that's an acceptance of that. And the void times certainly plummeted, which was a good thing, because obviously rent income is really important to our housing revenue account. So have we sort of reversed that policy or not? And what steps are the contractors having to address in order to improve that satisfaction? I mean, is it minor works, or are major works things like new bathroom required or kitchen update, that kind of thing? Perhaps you can give us some context on that, please.
Okay, so in answer to your question, yes, we have changed our ethos and our direction in terms of voids. However, I would say it's not a permanent thing, because of course rent loss is really important, and void times, you know, we need to be having that within our kind of periphery of a performance metric. However, at the moment, what we're doing is we're listening to tenants' feedback, and we've acted on that. So we're acting on them telling us we're moving into properties that have got lots of work to happen after we've moved in. That's causing us disruption. That's causing us issues. There is, you know, obviously we can see from our decency figures as well that we have got an ageing housing stock which requires quite a bit of work to be done once we get those properties back. So the reason we get most properties back is because somebody has unfortunately passed away. Those people have usually lived in their homes for 40 plus years. And obviously as they've gotten older, they may not have been able to decorate those homes very well or keep them into the standard that we would expect. So a lot of our voids are coming back, which have got needing a lot of work doing to them, which obviously again has an impact on void times, but also has an impact on the quality of property that we're giving back to the next person, because we don't have, we've obviously got a limited budget to do voids work, so we've got to balance all of these things together. What I would say is it's also something that our tenants have picked up on, like the tenant board, and we're going to be deciding at the tenant board meeting this month what their scrutiny projects need to look like for this year, and I'm 99% certain that is probably going to be one of the areas that they want to look at. So what I would say is the immediate thing is, we're not going to let properties with follow-on works. We hope that will then obviously increase the satisfaction felt by our tenants who are moving into our homes, because that's also the first impression that they get of us as a landlord. So we want to start off on the right foot. But as I said, I think over time that will happen. In terms of the contractors, so we do have really good contracts in place with our contractors now. So the head of housing repairs and maintenance, which Void sits under, is able to financially penalise the contractor for poor performance. We can have service credits, so money given back into taken off the final price of the contract. So these are all things that are being used and enacted at the moment, which should drive up contractor performance. All I can say, as I said again, I'm not the head of that service, but all I can say is watch this space, and we will hopefully see an improvement across the board.
Thank you. Councillor Grandon, do you want to ask your question? What I'll do is I won't take any more questions, but all the people that have got questions booked in, you'll be able to ask your question, because we're just hit an hour of the meeting and we want to have enough time to give the second item a good go. But Councillor Grandon, the floor is yours.
The question I was going to ask has been answered, but another point I wanted to just say on general repairs and things is and maintenance is that I have a situation in my ward where a number of people on this little estate were asking for insulation to be done, and it was all being done on a piecemeal basis, and I then asked for all of them to be looked at, and that is now going to be responded to. But it seems to me that when a couple of instances of a situation comes up, why isn't it automatically thought it's cheaper for us to get them all done at once rather than go and do one place at a time when a complaint comes up.
So, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I feel like that. So we are in the development of an asset management strategy at the moment. That is based on the data that we've got from the stock condition survey programme that we carried out, which I mentioned earlier, where we've only done 81%. We've done 81% of those surveys. We've got another 19% to do. I don't know the specifics around the reference that you're making, but all I can imagine is that obviously we can only go on a programme of works based on what we know about our stock. So we wouldn't just put a whole street on for the same works if only 3 properties needed that work to be done, for example. It sounds to me as if obviously there's some issues with the insulation of those properties. The other thing to just to mention again is we've only just onboarded 2 new insulation contractors. So beforehand we would have been using small contractors who may have only been able to do that piecemeal type of activity for us, whereas now we've got these contracts in place, we've got them, given them a programme of work, which, as I said, we are also prioritising those tenants that we know are vulnerable and living in a thermal comfort issue property. So yeah, that we of course would like to and we do where we have the information at our hand, we do make sure that we programme those works in, because it is more cost effective and it's a better service for the tenants as well. And obviously it does come back down to tenant availability. So if some tenants don't want us there at the same time as we're doing their neighbours, well, we have to respect that.
Councillor Holt.
Thanks, Chair. Most of these are going to revolve around damp and mould. Are you able to give us any indication of how many live jobs are outstanding re-dampen mould? Because obviously we're hitting the 24-hour targets, we're hitting various targets, but of those jobs that are on our books, how many are live and how many do we think we'll be able to complete within the next 12 months, 6 months? Because it's one thing having a report that tells you that these cases have been brought forward and we've actioned a response, but how many of those are live cases and what time frame are we expecting for those sort of cases to be resolved? That's my first question.
So with regards to Arab's Law legislation, anything that's not a Category 1 hazard has to be resolved within 12 weeks of us understanding that. So I don't have the figures to hand, but we can have a look and find out how many damp and mould kind of works we've got ongoing at the moment. And obviously, I think some properties will have several contributing factors to that, several repairs that need to be carried out, whilst others will only have 1 or 2 repairs that need to be carried out. So so the longer time period that we've got to be able to complete those works factors in those kind of more complex jobs. The other thing that we can do, as I said, if a property requires extensive work, and I'm talking, like we need to basically rebuild the thing, then we would need to have a conversation with that tenant about this is going to take more than 12 weeks to do it. We can't allow that to happen because it's in breach of the legislation. So we may need to decant you, move you to another suitable property, either permanently or on a temporary basis, which then means we are compliant with the law.
If I may, Chair, I would find it useful if if the committee were able to have that sort of information with the length of the jobs, and perhaps in future it's something that officers could look to present to us. It gives us a better picture of not just the headline numbers, but actually getting into the detail and actually how long these jobs actually take to complete. If I may follow up with another question, Chair. Relating to damp and mould again, it's interesting that on page 51 we have the subsections which I think is 60% windows and doors, 32% roofing. There's 0% for insulation and cladding. Again, when you look at mould and damp, why are we not perhaps prioritising those areas that may have an effect on damp and mould rather than kitchens and bathrooms that particularly may not?
Yeah, so you're again absolutely right to point that out. It is, as I've said, we've literally onboarded a new insulation contractor over the last couple of weeks. So that's the reason that sits at 0%, because we didn't have a contract in place to be able to deliver that work. And I think members will remember prior to the transformation, over the last 18 months we have implemented over 40 new contracts for repairs, assets, asset management, because we had none before. We were doing everything just on a kind of piece-by-piece basis. We had none of those performance measures within those contracts to hold those contractors to performance, and obviously putting together a proper contract through procurement to make sure we're getting value for money. Those things take time, so that's why things haven't progressed very well. But you should see that in the next quarter's report. You'll start to see that needle move on damp and mould. Sorry, on insulation and cladding.
Chair, if I may, I think the councillor raises a very good point around the purpose of sharing this report at this scrutiny group and triangulating information that's presented to you. So I would like to see that as well, and feel that just get a better look under the hood around follow-on actions from our damp and mould cases. So I think that's something we're definitely going to work on. But as David said, we're in the place where we've onboarded several new contractors, and we're in the place of embedding and finessing our data that we're able to extract out of them and upload into our portals. But that's something I'd like to see as well. So yeah, we can take that away.
Just one last point as well. The social housing decarbonisation funding. So obviously we've got around 50 properties in each district initially that we've been awarded money for to improve their thermal comfort. They don't appear to have been included within that report, so I'll take that back to the assets team and ask them to do that, because we have done some insulation, if that makes sense. So it should be at least over 0%. But yeah.
Chair, another question. That was really, you've touched on already, about contractors and performance-led. What checks and measures have we got in place to ensure that those new contractors are actually doing a good job, and what clauses do we have, if they are not, to get rid of them and make sure they do actually pull in line and complete jobs and complete them in good time and properly?
So a couple of points. You'll notice I've probably spoken quite a bit about contractors today, and that we've got 2 insulation contractors. We like to try and have a contractor for each district, because it helps in terms of being able to manage those contractors. So if one does start to underperform, we can start to use, we can use another one that will. So we're not left without anything, because that's another risk as well. And contractors know if you're tied in with one contractor and you've got problems, you struggle then to be able to do that. As I've said earlier as well, all of our new contracts do have these, performance metrics. We meet with them monthly to talk, as contract management. Good contract management is meeting with your contractor monthly, reviewing performance indicators, reviewing complaint performance that you're getting through, addressing those issues on a regular basis before they become big issues. So that is all happening. And as I said, we also try to get at least 2 contractors in for each specialist area, so that we have that full fail-safe if we need it. I think that answer most of the question? Or
another one? You mentioned, I think there's 19% remaining of housing stock to be inspected. Bearing in mind the increase in the damp and mould and the seasonal conditions that probably relate to that increase, of those properties that we've inspected, how many would you expect do not show issues with damp and mould due to the seasonal time that they are inspected? If they're inspected during the summer, you're not going to see it. But actually it doesn't really paint a true picture possibly of the problems that our tenants have, because if you don't go in the winter months, you're not going to see it unless they ring up and complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to balance, obviously, what we can do. We have a programme. We're supposed to inspect all of our homes for a stock condition survey every 5 years. So as long as we've done that survey within a 5-year period, we should know. We do rely on our tenants to report issues to us, and we would hope that they do. The remaining 19%, some of those are going to be challenging. So some of those are going to be people that haven't let us in for various different reasons. But what we're also doing with the contractor that we've got to, so we're taking a dual approach to this. So we're using our internal surveyors and Ridge, the contractor that carried out the 81% for us. We've also expecting them to attempt to access those properties in evenings and weekends, because I think a lot of the reason why they didn't get into that 19% was because, you know, a vast majority of our tenants work, so and would not necessarily have been at home for us to do those surveys. So again, we use it. We've also got the vulnerability information now as well. So some of those people may have been written to and couldn't read or write a letter, so didn't know that they had to be in, for example. So we are using all of that information, and that will hopefully help us to get into all of our properties by the beginning of June, which is the target that the regulator is aware of as well, and will be asking us for an update on, I'm sure.
Chair, if I could just come in, I would like to assure the committee that this isn't the kind of a one and done survey approach. Our contractors are in our resident and tenants' homes all the time, and so we are leveraging our contract management through our contractors and using their insight and their eyes as when they're going in. So we hold regular contract meetings, and part of those agenda on the meetings is feeding back to us any concerns and their responsibility as a contractor who's working in partnership with us to do that as well. So we constantly enrich that data.
Thank you. We have Councillor Rowe next. We're starting to get quite late in this meeting with this. So if you could start thinking about recommendations and comments that you're going to make for debate as we come to the end of the questions, so that we can sort of thrash that out nice and quickly at the in the debate part of it. And and because we really want to hit that break at the end of this item, so that we can you know, there's a natural transition and we can change officers and that. So Councillor Rowe.
Going back to the hate incidents reporting bit, is it related to kind of what's legally recognised as hate incidents, or do you kind of look at themes? Because, for example, like misogyny, things faced by women, non-binary people, asexuals, they're not necessarily covered by different bits of legislation, but would still be within the themes of what for other groups would be hate crimes. So yeah, is it, I get in this report, I'm guessing it's to do with legislation because you're having to report on that, but do you have another way where you're looking at whether there's themes, rather than just the legislation?
So was this, sorry, in relation to the hate crime statistics?
Yeah.
So as part of the work that we've done on getting to know our tenants, we have captured tenants' gender identities. We haven't captured sexuality because we don't feel that that has any bearing on how we deliver a service to our tenant, but we do want to know, from a representative point of view, how represented are our tenants in terms of the engagement that we carry out when we're doing our things that we need to do, like our tenant satisfaction surveys. We need to make sure that we're not asking everybody who's over 80 and is, probably very satisfied, because they tend to be more satisfied. But in terms of gender identity and hate crime, that is all the hate crime statistic. It's only based on our tenants who have experienced it. So it's only the numbers of tenants who live in one of our homes who have experienced it that we would count. But yeah, we don't, thankfully, we don't tend to have an awful lot, but that's not to say it's not happening. It's just to say it's probably underreported maybe. And again, that would also be the work of our housing officers. If there were any of our tenants experiencing hate in any form, for any reason, then we would be working with that household very closely to mitigate any risks against them, and to obviously try to resolve those issues and take any enforcement action as required by the perpetrators.
Yeah, I suppose my point was, there's some bits which aren't included in hate crime legislation or equality law, and so that's where kind of what you'd be reporting on might not make a link when there's similar behaviours affecting different groups.
I think it's probably helpful to share that before the report reaches the committee here, it goes through some iterations and forums, And so the heads of service and team managers will scrutinise the data, and what you'll see underneath all of this is different categories and, you know, grit around what makes up that 4% of the hate crime. And it's for us to sit and understand and then respond to that with training for our staff, or so, for example, if it's domestic violence that sits under that hate crime and it's in a particular spot in Babergh, we will see that and we will be able to scrutinise that as a team, and then we can respond to that. Yeah, so just some assurance that that scrutiny with the detailing of those cases does go on, but at a more operational level, and we try and understand where we have some skills and training or skills gaps with our teams, and we try and, you know, respond to that with training and upskilling people to yeah.
I feel like Councillor Holt wants to come in there, and I have to indulge him because he is the vice chair of this committee. But is that on this exact point that you want to speak?
It's just something that David said. It was just said, I'm sure he said that most people over 80 are more quite happy, but I would counter that and say that they don't want to make a fuss. They're more tolerant. They come from an era where, you know, things weren't always right. So I wouldn't make that assumption. Just want to point that out.
I think that's a good point, well made. Councillor Piper.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, so when we instructed our current survey provider, Acuity, they give us the numbers of surveys that we should be completing to get the required confidence level of 95%. So we did that based on the number of lettings, for example, for that particular survey the previous year. The actual numbers should be around at least 50 a year to be able to give you the confidence level required. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many we've done up until this point, but they aim to, and obviously it's all about whether or not somebody responds to that invitation or picks up the phone, because we send an online one first, and then if we don't get anything, then the survey company rings them to try and get those numbers up. But yeah, based on the number of lettings that we have, we should be aiming to have a good confidence level for new move-ins. We should be aiming for about 50 surveys per year. Repairs, it's around 300 per district. Sorry, that's per district as well, per district per year. So yeah, so it'll be 100 surveys in total for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk.
Okay, that's quite small numbers compared to how many people consider it.
Everybody gets the opportunity though, so everybody that moves in receives that survey, so we could end up with more. But as I said, it's all about confidence levels, and there's, as you know, there's a science to that, and that is we aim for 95% confidence, which is pretty standard.
Thank you. Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've almost forgotten the question by now. Councillor Holt asked the question which I was going to ask about asset improvement and the insulation programme. I think it's, we've all, most of us, sat through 2 years or so of listening to the transformation story, and this is more towards debate and recommendations really, but there is a question. I think it's been transformational in terms of what David's done, his team and everything, because it's, you know, the way we've changed our inspection regimes, improved things. And I think one of the key things is that on page 60, the transaction repairs data table, you know, we've got massive levels of satisfaction in terms of dealing with us, overall repairs, quality of repairs. We must be doing something right. You know, and it's easy sometimes to focus on the negatives, and I know that's part of our job, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're doing a super good job, and I'd like to congratulate David and his team for doing an amazing job for us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patchett, to finish off the last question, then we'll go into debate.
Okay, let's make it a good one. So, 55-56, customer satisfaction. So, like, I fully understand that satisfaction is actually very subjective. It's very down to the individual. Two people with an identical repair, one person could be very satisfied with a 2-week repair, whereas someone else would actually be very dissatisfied that it took a week to do the exact same thing. So I understand, like, you know, customer satisfaction figures you've got to take with a pinch of salt. But our targets on that, I'd like to know the origins of them, because normally the target figures are quite round figures, 100%, 85%, and they're perhaps industry standard figures. These target figures here have kind of got fractions on them, and we seem to be, if you look at the trend, our target looks to be consistently lower than what we're actually achieving. So I'm not implying that you're manufacturing the target so that we always meet it, but what I'm asking is, these have got there's no consistency whatsoever to any of these targets in any of the areas. So my question is, how did we arrive at these target figures, please?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So that was actually something that was a recommendation last time, was to advise members how we come up with those targets. So on the last page of the report, it does talk about how we set our targets and how we benchmark. So with regards to the tenant satisfaction measure surveys, the reason they are such random figures is because it's our portfolio holders and our tenant board who set those targets. They do that based on benchmarking information that they see as of the mid-year performance point. So we use a company called Housemark, which is the national kind of housing benchmarking organisation. We look at all local authority landlords with under 10,000 homes as a peer group, if you like, and we give the tenants our kind of median scores and our sort of quartile 1 and quartile 4 scores as well, so they can see where that is. So as it says, we meet annually with our portfolio holders and our tenant board to review our tenant satisfaction measure performance from the previous year, and we review sector performance based on Housemark's mid-year performance for the tenant satisfaction measure scores across the sector with similar landlords to ourselves, and we agree performance targets for the year ahead. Basically, where we are under the median, we will always aim for the median, which could be a point of a percentage. If we are already at the median, we will aim for quartile 1 performance. They are challenging and stretching. I mean, some of the tenants last year in that exercise, I think the members will remember, is we had proposed to leave some of the targets where they were because we weren't quite meeting them, and they challenged us and said, no, you can improve those by at least 1%. So they asked us to increase those targets by 1%, where we were saying, well, look, we're still going to be really good if we didn't. So yeah, does that answer the question as to how we set targets? And they're obviously
absolutely.
there for tenant and members to set those targets. So.
Absolutely, it does. But I would like to recommend that.
And we go into debate.
I can't recommend as a question then.
No, I'm saying, please, if you'd like to recommend now, and we'll go into debate without me announcing it.
Okay, so I'd like to recommend that we don't have these floating targets, because there's not consistency there. I think you should have an ambitious target, because we're a progressive council. I think we should have ambitious targets, and we've got something to strive towards. These floating targets that are set mid-year, it's just not ambitious or progressive. I like the way that we've got the tenants board involved, and obviously it would be the cabinet members involved as well. But I just, it doesn't sit well with me, these floating targets. I would rather have something ambitious to strive towards myself. I don't know what the other members think.
And yeah, we'll leave members to think about that. So we're in debate now. Thank you for all those questions. That was a really intense question session. It's David White's last scrutiny meeting. And
It's his last one.
yeah, that's it. And as always, he's done an amazing job with being honest and telling us exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what he's talking about, no matter what the subject. And I think we're going to miss him. Yeah, thank you for... you've been in the scrutiny committee ever such a lot over the last few years, yeah, we always get the same sort of high quality answers and everything, and the work you've done with the tenant scrutiny board and everything, and the housing transformation, it's been a transformation, because when when you first got hold of it, it was very different to this. But for this paper, I do see that we still have the problems with accessing properties, which really lets us down with these figures. It makes things so difficult. We've still got fire alarms and CO2 alarm issues, that, like 10 to 20 houses in the thing that we haven't got into, and I really do believe that that's because we can't get into them in time. But we're moving in the right direction. We've got 61 houses off the, came into decent home standard in mid-Suffolk, and a similar amount in Babergh. And this report just doesn't seem scared to look into certain things that we might not like the answer if we get the good feedback on it. And I think that's really important. We don't always do everything to yield a positive answer, but I think I like the bit where we're gearing up to deal with the mould and damp and mould more, and we're making sure resources are there to do that at the time of year that we need to do it. I think that's a fantastic idea. But it's a good report. I'm really pleased with that. I think I've heard recommendations sort of mentioned in here, and I'm hoping to go back to the committee and those to sort of pop out and just to talk about what we can recommend on this. But we don't necessarily need to recommend everything, but I have heard some quite good things earlier. So I'll go to the floor, and would anyone like to talk on this debate? Councillor Matheson and then Councillor Rowe.
Yes, as we're debating, I'd like to debate against Councillor Patchett's most recent view about the floating targets, etc. I think that it would be a mistake to concentrate to get really high standards, because in the real world it's priorities all the time. So you don't want to have an unduly high target dragging us away from the things that are not too good. And so really, having heard this, how it is set, and the involvement of the portfolio holders, I would think that it's sufficient to set a target that puts us ahead of the average, so that we are better than average, would be a reasonable place to go. So if the benchmark's moving up, then that will be pushing us to also be moving up. So I think that, I don't quite actually agree that little point there. But apart from that, I mean, if we turn into recommendations, Chair, or we're going to have some more debate first?
Well, would you like to give us a recommendation?
Well, I think that there was certainly something there about the communications point, that having understanding why we're not using that which is not good. Nevertheless, it sounds as if it's the right way to forward, to go forward and improve it a bit more. But apart from that, I mean, I think that as Chair said, the generality is that things are improving. There is very little where you can look and say, oh God, things are getting worse there. Very, very few indeed, which is great, really. It is encouraging, because it is an inevitably difficult business, social housing. And, I'm only thankful that I haven't got a great deal of it in my ward, frankly.
So is the recommendation there that, because we talked about the portal and Councillor Patchett said the way everything's in one space.
Something of that kind which provides an easier to access record of sorting out that individual problem stroke, so house. I mean, no doubt things happen where you've got three different things that are a problem in one house, and so that it would, that would be one of the obvious linkages.
It does seem that
within it.
we were trying to do that, but we had problem with the technology that is that correct?
Yeah, it's not, we are still exploring that, and I'm hoping we'll launch it within the next sort of 3 to 6 months, because we've gone back to the provider and said this isn't fit for purpose. It's not what we were sold. It doesn't look like what it was that you showed us in the demo. The rest of it I'm very happy with, and it all works very well. But we've us and other providers that use their tool set have all fed back the same thing and said your tenant portal is not good. So they've heard that, they're developing it, they're going to be making some changes to it. As soon as those changes have been made, we then want to get our tenants in to try it and test it and have a look at it for us and see what their thoughts are on it as well. And if it gets the tenant seal of approval, we will launch it and then they can have that. But at the moment, I think it would have caused more issues and more concerns us launching it and then having a load of people complaining about it.
Yeah, if it's not right. Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, just a little tiny question from that. Do we attend a user group meeting occasionally of that particular software?
Yes, all the time.
So that doesn't need to get in the recommendation. Yeah. Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, my recommendation is that we get updates from assets about how much of our stock is on roads that haven't been adopted by Suffolk County Council and kind of by year. So it's like things that are newly bought or new builds, 1 year, 2 years, so on. So you can see where there's an issue that just hasn't been resolved for our tenants, but as was pointed out, that's kind of an assets bit. And I suppose on the Councillor Patchett's point, I'm not sure it's quite worded right, but I can see the point of going, if we're saying the target is below what we're achieving, then that could feel like it needs to be kind of slightly better worked out, basically. And I think involving the tenant board and so as there is a good way to have that discussion, because then it makes them feel like there's ownership and have input, which is kind of a driving value of us.
Sorry, Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if it would be worthwhile, but I mean, this report is really interesting and really worthwhile. I wondered if it would be worth having some data so we can see the numbers that the percentages relate to. So like 60% of what number of people have responded. For example, David mentioned, the ASB, for example, was only 0%, but as David said, it was only one person replied. If that had been positive, that would have been 100%. So to give some context around the figures we're seeing, the numbers of respondents we're getting, if it's a high number, or I mean, I know 90% is 90% if that's our target, but if it's 90% of 2 people or 90% of 100 people, there'd be a difference. So if it's possible, perhaps get some...
I totally agree. I think for one of them, for the repairs completed in our timelines, I had made from the percentage point, it could be anything from about 300 in the quarter to 1,500 and lots in between. So certain ones, like where a percentage is applied to a number of repairs and things like that, I think we do want the numbers.
Yeah.
And maybe just somewhere just like that's come from. And I totally agree with that. Right. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. I think if you look at the overall trends in this document, we're actually doing quite well. I think the physicality of us, receiving requests and dealing with them, and getting them done on time to industry standards and our standards, is really positive. Okay, so this is a positive document to me. And again, this is why I guess I've honed in on the low aspiration of the targets of satisfaction. And I think, it just looks a bit like a race to the bottom. And if you're setting your targets mid-year and you're unambitious, you're always going to achieve that, unambitiousness, you'll always achieve it. I think if industry, if industry had satisfaction targets as low as 33%, they must be quite a terrible company to have something as low as 33% satisfaction, which means you've got, nearly 70% in that area are completely unhappy with your service. We cannot accept 33.6% as a target we want to achieve. Anything below 50% anywhere surely cannot be acceptable. How I would do this, maybe this is a recommendation, is I would take the previous 4 quarters as a mean average. Okay? I would add them up, I would divide them by 4, because that's how quarters work, there's 4 of them, and add 5%. Like, how, it's mildly ambitious, I would say, a 5% improvement over a 12-month period. I cannot accept that we are happy with 33% satisfaction in any area of this council. So that is why I've highlighted it. We should be ambitious, we should be progressive, and below 50% is neither of those things. Thank you. No, absolutely not. No, we're setting a low benchmark early on in the year, and funny enough, we're always achieving it. So you add all 4 up, you divide by 4, you add 5%, there's your target for the next year. Simple.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it, about where you set your targets. The worry for me would be if we change the targets, then next year we'll be looking at it and we're going, well, hang on a minute, we've missed the target. We're below, and we could change the amber rating, so that's fine in looking at it. But I think what we need to do, if we are changing targets, we need to have the old target in brackets so that we can actually see, compared to the old target, we were performing quite well, but compared to the new target, we're rather stretching ourselves now. Because I think otherwise, if you continually change the targets, so I think perhaps the more appropriate recommendation would be that the Cabinet looks at how they set their targets in conjunction with other providers, with Housemarque, etc., and maybe considers whether they are appropriate to the actual particular thing that you're measuring, rather than give them a methodology for how they should do it. Because I think we should ask the Cabinet members and the Cabinet overall to look at that and whether the targets are any longer appropriate. I do think if we are actually overachieving against the target, then yes, clearly we should raise that target. But we have to be aware of the subtleties of raising the target and the way that the housing regulator will look at those. There needs to be some narrative behind it, because otherwise, all of a sudden, we're going to get a poorer report, because we've actually stretched the targets too far, perhaps, in some circumstances. So there's a lot more to changing the targets than meets the eye.
I do feel a little bit like we will hit a certain point no matter what the target, because it's the best endeavour. I shouldn't think there's much backing off as we come close to the target, and then we've done it, so we won't bother visiting those properties or however it works out. And then if we were continually overachieving, we would move up the target, which is kind of the, I don't know. I think this is something we need to talk about. Councillor Holt.
I agree with Councillor Patchett, to be honest. I think if you set such a low bar, then I don't think that looks good for an authority. I think you should be looking to achieve a much higher percentage than 33%. That's my only comment on that. What I would like to say, from a recommendation point of view, is this live job data. I think that's something that we could explore and request that we have presented to RNS is some evidence of live jobs, the time frames taken on these jobs, because it's one thing, as I say, to acknowledge a tenant, but it's another to complete their issue, their complaint, their request in a sensible time frame. And I think if we don't look at that and scrutinise that, then it's great having the acknowledgement, but we want to see it to the end, and the end is the completion of their issue. So I'd like that to be a recommendation in some shape or form, that we have that information going forward. Numbers who have refused contact, whether there is a mechanism that we can try and analyse as to why. Some people don't want to be contacted. Some people are just perhaps lonely and just do not want people in their house. And how are we going to address that? How do we address that? Do we actually carry out external inspections? When we do a property inspection, are there any external paths? Do we note fences? Do we note guttering? I know we do roofs. Oil tanks? Are there any data that we have on those? Because they are also important for tenants. And probably a lot of fences are one of our issues that we have most raised, I would have thought. And tenant data, we've mentioned about contact data. Do we constantly refresh, inquire as to their preference, whether it be phone, mobile, email, text, in writing? How often do we refresh the data that we hold for their preference of contact? So whether we could have that possibly on there as well. But those are some recommendations that I'd like to see.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. And I think we'll stick those in. Do you need to discuss these with the recommendation makers or anything, or should we just read them out and see if they're happy with them?
Thank you, Chair. I'd probably need 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, to sort of put together all the recommendations. On the recommendation about the targets, setting targets, it might be worth, if there's kind of conflicting opinion, if we take that vote as a separate vote, or we can discuss it further before we get to that point.
I think maybe we can do hands up for each one as you read them out, and then we'll get a good idea of what people like. If there's any argument, we'll thrash that out. But Councillor Patchett put his hand up just before Councillor McLaren.
No, actually, Councillor McLaren did have that hand up.
Oh, did you? Sorry, Councillor McLaren. I saw Councillor Patchett. Sorry.
Chair, I think looking at that antisocial behaviour, it doesn't tell us anything about antisocial behaviour. It tells us about the satisfaction. I'd like, and it may be because I've not been on the committee, so I'm coming back to the committee, I would have liked to have seen a bit more information about what levels of antisocial behaviour are happening. I think that would give us a better picture of the outcome of the satisfaction score.
Yeah, okay. And Councillor Patchett, and then I think what we'll do is we'll have our break a little bit early, give you a chance to have a break and do those recommendations. And so, Councillor Patchett.
Yeah, I need 10 more seconds, please. If you look at the reason why, okay, ask yourself the reason why the other percentages have increased and performance has increased, okay? A lot of it is because these are government set out mandated targets, okay? So we have to achieve them. So we go all out to achieve them because we have to, because there are consequences, okay? And there's scrutiny on them from outside agencies. So when we set ourselves a low bar with no consequences or penalties, you will maintain at that low bar. That's why you're not seeing any improvements in these stats, because you're setting it low with no consequences. So you can see the benefits of setting a higher target in all of the other stats, okay? So that is why you have to set a higher target in this area, or else the area will not improve, okay? So just look at the other stats and just think why they went up, and why this one isn't. It's very simple.
Thank you, Councillor Patcher. We'll now have 10 minutes break. If any of the officers need to leave or anything, thank you very much for being here. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. back, everyone. We've been talking about the recommendations, and what we're going to do is we're going to do everything on block apart from the targets recommendation, which I think we might want to debate a little bit, because there seems to be two different ideas in the room about what that would be. So if I pass over to Alicia and she furnishes you with the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So I have 5 recommendations for on-block voting. Number 1 is that the committee notes the Quarter 2 and Quarter 3 Council Housing Performance and Assurance Report. Recommendation 2, that future Council Housing Assurance Reports include information on the number of outstanding repair cases, the time taken to make necessary repairs, and the actions taken as a result of such cases, which hopefully covers Councillor Holt's point. Recommendation 3, that future Council Housing Assurance Reports include further contextual information, such as the number of respondents, to set out a clearer narrative in the report, which hopefully covers Councillor Jamieson's recommendation. Recommendation 4, that future reports include additional information on the types of antisocial behaviour carried out within the report's time frame and how this has been resolved, which hopefully covers Councillor McLaren's recommendation. And lastly, recommendation 5, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee receives further information from the Assets Department on the amount of council housing stock located on roads not adopted by Suffolk County Council, which hopefully covers Councillor Rowe's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So if we've got those on block, does anybody need to discuss anything that will mean they can't talk, they can't vote? Councillor Scarf.
I could certainly vote for it, but I'd like recommendation 1 expanded a little, because I think we do need to recognise the considerable amount of work that's been going on within the housing service over the last couple of years, and I think it'd be remiss of us not to actually recognise that as part of recommendation 1. I'm sure other members feel the same, because the direction of travel is positive generally on most areas, and I think that we do need to recognise the good work that the housing section have done and the officers and what they've put into the effort, and indeed the contractors and everyone involved.
Could we bump that up a little bit then? And yeah, but I think that's important. I think we do need to recognise that.
Thank you, Councillor Scarr. So I can add on to the end of recommendation 1 that the committee commends the work undertaken to make improvements to the council's housing service.
Right. Okay, so what I'll do a hands up. Oh, sorry, can I have a proposer? And a Councillor Scarf proposing and a seconder. Councillor Jamieson. 3 hands went up at exactly the same time then. So, we'll do a hands up vote on that block. All in favour? So that is unanimous. So we'll keep those recommendations, and then we need to maybe discuss this next one a bit more.
Thank you, Chair. So this has hopefully tried, or at least started to capture what Councillor Patchett is trying to recommend. So that is that the Cabinet Members for Housing, in partnership with the Tenant Scrutiny Board, look to set more ambitious targets across all key performance indicators.
How do you feel about that, Councillor Patchett? Is that what you're...
Yeah, more ambitious targets, yeah. I don't think it's our place to set percentages, really. Okay. Because we're certainly not the experts.
I think that's a really good move, yeah, because I think we've got to be careful we don't make something impossible or tie things up too much when we have a vote like this, because we're directing, we're not necessarily making the target.
I mean, I guess the only thing I would stipulate on it, without being specific, is that it is a percentage increase over the average of a period. So whether that's a year or 2 years, that's the only, a more ambitious target that sits a certain percentage above, but I'm not going to stipulate that percentage, if you see what I mean. It does kind of.
You've got to be careful, because I think the recommendation's going to maybe be looked on quite. We've got to be careful we don't introduce something that makes it not.
Yeah, no, we can't introduce a mechanism. No,
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah.
Councillor Scarf.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to vote for that, but I think my original point is where you change a target, I think we just need that change target in brackets so that we can actually do two measurements. We can measure against what the old target was, and we can see the direction of travel, whether it's up or down, and then we see the new target, because I think otherwise, in terms of we've been looking at this for so long, you know, over the different quarters, we'll get lost.
It does help when we've got that as, you know, a committee, isn't it? Councillor Rowe. Yeah.
We've got like 100%, where the target's 100% and we're getting like 99.68. We're not looking to increase that target.
That is a really good point, because I have in mind that sometimes we look back at these things in 6 months' time and they don't mean quite as much to us as they did before. And I think it might be important to add that where we're underperforming or
where we're overperforming.
Overperforming, yeah. Or targets are
particularly low.
Is that, Councillor Patchett, would you want to specify what targets we're looking at, just to make it a little bit easier to deal with?
So this is the satisfaction ones, isn't it?
We haven't actually specified any particular targets. That's what I mean. Quite often with these recommendations, we go away and we come back later, and they don't mean as quite so much sense because we haven't absolutely zeroed in on a particular thing that we're trying to do. So while you're looking at that, I'll bring in Councillor Holt because he wants to talk on this.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted the officers' input as well. I mean, we're here to make recommendations, but I'd like their input as to how they see this, because there's no point in us stretching beyond our remit. Not that we've necessarily got one in this, but I don't want there to be any government regulations or regulations that we're sort of trying to manipulate. I just want their input on what we're trying to recommend.
So yes, I don't disagree that potentially some of our targets are a little bit under, you know, where we might want to, as an ambitious landlord, achieve. I do have this thing about the complaint satisfaction, and I've just pulled up some information from the regulator. So the median score for that, which is every landlord in the country with low-cost rented accommodation, so social housing, with over 1,000 homes, the median score last year was 34.5% satisfied with how we handle complaints. This is it's well understood across the sector that score is very, very low, and we're not really sure yet why, because we've only been doing tenant satisfaction measures for the last 2 and a bit years. So the other thing to point out as well is obviously the benchmarking data that we have available to us. So we have to collect the information within a financial year. So we then need to submit our end of year figure by the 30th of June. By the time the regulator kind of looks at all of that and then gives you the information, that's usually around September, which is why we use a mid-year figure to do that activity and that exercise to set the target for the following year. So what I'm saying is by the time we end up setting the target, actually the sector might have moved on a little bit, and it could actually be that we are a little bit under. So I would just say that there is, I don't want members to think that we're not being ambitious and we haven't just plucked these numbers out of thin air. We have looked at it and looked at what others do and how they set their targets. But yeah, I'm open to the challenge that we could be a little bit more ambitious. So I don't have a problem with that.
So I think a general recommendation that we are more ambitious with our complaint satisfaction target is absolutely fine to say without putting any specifics on it. Just a general, we should be more ambitious. That's, I think, just a general.
What about if we recommended the portfolio holder looks at the targets and reviews whether they find those targets acceptable?
Yeah, now they've gone, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's put
yeah.
it on them.
We'll
Yeah,
give
brilliant.
them some work to do. Yeah. But
Can I just come in? I'm still trying to get a little bit more kind of under the hood of some of our data and, you know, look at our PIs and where is it drawing my attention? And I would like to just understand the data a little bit more. We are focusing a lot of our resources and our capacity to the damp and mould and our repairs piece. And what I wouldn't want to do is, whilst we're meeting a sector median set target, is then divert my resources from one area to another because we wish to, rightly so, be more ambitious. What I would propose is give us a little bit of time to sensibly think about what it means to increase that target and what our internal resources are able to do in that. But I hear the challenge. If you don't increase them, you know, where's the stretch? I'm just conscious that we are stretching in a number of areas at the moment.
so I really want to get this voted on, so I'll go to Councillor Patchett, as the owner of the recommendation.
Absolutely, Mandy. I get what you're saying, that you want to go back, you want to look at essentially what your system can handle, but that isn't really what this is about, what they can handle right now. We're striving for improvement. So I guess for you to say, well, no, 33% is absolutely fine because that's what my team can handle at the moment, that's not a good answer for me, because what I want you to say is, well, yes, it's 33%, that's all they can handle, let's keep it at that. But no, this is where the improvement comes in.
Right,
so the benchmark where you are now, I want you to improve.
We won't debate this anymore. We'll take this to the vote. You're happy with the recommendation? Should we just read out the recommendation and you can give us a nod if you're happy with it?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Patchett, could I just confirm that the target that we're specifically looking at is complaint satisfaction? Cool, perfect. So the recommendation will now read that the Cabinet members for Housing, in partnership with the Tenant Scrutiny Board, look to set more ambitious complaint satisfaction targets.
Right, okay, and let's have a hands. Councillor Patchett proposing. I'm quite. Councillor Grandon is seconding. So let's hands up, vote for that, and then we'll do everything else for that. That's unanimous. Would you like to go to the electronic vote for?
No, that's fine. We can just take that as a vote.
Are you happy to? Yeah. Okay. So okay, that's the all those recommendations were carried. So thank you very much for all the work you've put in over the morning. It's been quite a long meeting item, but I'm afraid there was a lot to talk about, and I think it was all very constructive. So we'll quickly go on to item 2. Sorry, not item 2. Item 10, JOS 2520 Annual Complaints Report 2024 to 2025. So if we could do are you introducing, Councillor? What I thought we'd do is just do an introduction of anyone that's here for this item, just for the cameras, and then we'll go straight into Councillor Mellon's introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm suffering rather badly from the cold, so Councillor Mellon's going to do most of the talking and introduction here. But we have quite a number of officers here. First of all, actually, would you like to do the introductions? I can feel my voice going already.
Well, I'll introduce myself and I'll let the officers introduce themselves.
Oh, sorry, I'm Alistair McCraw, by the way. I'm the chair for the not the chair, what am I? Oh, yes, I'm the cabinet member for this portfolio at Babergh.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Andy Mellon, so I'm the portfolio holder for this area in Suffolk, and I'll hand over to Sam.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Lake. I'm the Director for Customers, Vulnerabilities and Governance and was previously the Head of Customer Experience, so complaints falls under my area.
Hello, I'm Gary Allen. I'm the Customer Service and Complaints Manager.
And I'm James Hart, and I am the Complaints and Feedback Officer.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So we're pleased to present the annual complaints report for 2024/25. This report provides an overview of the 1,227 Stage 1 and 160 Stage 2 complaints received during the year, as well as the 233 compliments which were submitted by residents. So the report highlights key trends across our services and demonstrates how resident feedback continues to inform improvements in performance and service delivery. I think the most important thing to note is that we saw a reduction in our housing repairs and maintenance complaints, and that's the first time in 3 years that we've got that. And that really reflects the impact of recent policy changes and service enhancements. But at the same time, the increased accessibility provided by our new online complaints system has meant there's been an uptick in the number of complaints across other service areas, and particularly areas like waste collections, car parks and public realm. Overall, I think it's important to note that complaints make up a very small amount of our general feedback, only 2.6%, and if we consider all the interactions that residents have with our services, it's even lower than that. However, we think it's really important to assess these complaints and learn from them, and we're committed to using our complaints and our compliments and our wider feedback to strengthen our approach to serving our customers and residents, and also improving transparency and improving the residents' experience. So actually early indications for this current year that we're already in, the 25-26, show some encouraging progress as we continue to build on this work. I'm going to hand over now to James Hart, who's going to give the committee a short presentation, if it's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. Today I'm presenting the 24-25 Annual Complaints Performance Update. I will highlight the key trends and the improvements we've made and what the early indicators show for 25-26. The aim is to give assurance that we are learning from complaints and using them to improve our services. Next slide. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry, what? Oh. Ah. Here we go. One of the committee's requests from last year was for us to introduce a process map to show how our complaints process works. We now provide 2 process maps. One of these is included on the slide, and both versions are available on our website for residents. Stage 1 and Stage 2 are the same on both process maps. However, there are 2 key differences. One is specifically for our tenants, showing escalation routes for the Housing Ombudsman for issues relating to our responsibilities as a social housing landlord, and the other covers all types of complaints, showing the escalation routes for local government ombudsman. We first moved over to a digital complaint system in 2020, and since then we have seen a slight increase in complaints over the last few years. These increases were predominantly initially driven by delays to housing repairs following the COVID-19 pandemic, and more recently through the introduction of the Housing Ombudsman's Complaint Handling Code. This has given more visibility and rights to tenants to escalate their complaint regarding their social housing landlord. Nationally, complaints made to social housing landlords regarding their responsibilities continue to rise. In June 2024, partway through the reporting year of this report, we introduced our most recent complaint system. The introduction of this new system also drove the increase in volume of feedback that we have received. This is in line with other local authorities who have also known to see an increase in complaints received. It is important to note that complaints make up a very small percentage of our overall resident contact, representing 2.6% of general inquiry contact and less than 1% of all contact into the council. Housing continues to make up the largest share of complaints that the councils receive, making up around 57%. Whilst complaints have risen in some service areas outside of housing, including operations, most of our teams have not seen fluctuations in the number of complaints received. Out of the 290 other complaints received, 99 of these were relating to services outside of the council's control. The remaining 191 complaints were in relation to our remaining service areas, and this represents 16% of the complaints that were received. This is a minimal increase of only 5 compared to 23-24, and broadly in line with the past 2 years where non-housing and non-operations complaints made up 14% and 17% of our complaints received respectively. We see this trend as positive, especially considering the high level of interaction that some of our departments have with residents. At stage 1 of our complaints process, 55% of our complaints received are either not upheld or not considered to be a complaint, and around 13% of our complaints are escalated to stage 2. Upheld complaints demonstrate that there was some level of service failure when investigating the resident's complaint. Complaints that were not upheld found no fault in how the council has acted when dealing with the matters raised in the complaint, and for those complaints not considered to be a complaint, these are closed in this manner if it is considered something other than a complaint. This could be a first request for a service, something that is outside the council's control, or there may be an appeals route in place, such as housing allocations process or the planning inspectorate. We include these figures in our data as we still provide a written response to our residents, explaining who they may need to contact or what steps we have taken to assist them. Recording these complaints can still provide us with valued feedback and information. Housing and operations received the most compliments, and this is similar to our level of complaints, as they are two of our most publicly facing service areas. We are continuing to see a rise in the number of compliments that we received, with the level of compliments received increasing in each of the last 3 years. Trends relate to staff going above and beyond, providing high-quality customer service and supporting those in need. We will continue to promote compliments and work with our teams to ensure compliments are logged and shared with individuals and teams to promote high-quality service that our employees provide to our residents. The numbers that you see on screen are in the report are for decisions made by the Housing Ombudsman in 2024 and 25. Some of these cases would have initially entered our complaints procedure as far back as 2023. This is because there can be delays in the Housing Ombudsman reviewing complaints due to the extremely high levels of complaints that they receive. Complaints to the Housing Ombudsman continue to arise across the sector nationally. The Housing Ombudsman can make multiple findings on a single complaint because one resident's case can include several distinct types of service failure. These include delays in repairs, poor communication, and issues with complaint handling. All of these are assessed separately to fully capture all aspects of the landlord's performance. Many of these complaints were made to the council prior to our changes in process within our housing department, and the findings from these complaints investigated by the Housing Ombudsman have shaped several of the service improvements that have recently been implemented. Turning to the local government outcomes for this year, overall our figures for the LGR are based on a very small number of cases, and whilst we strive for this to be 0 cases upheld, we believe these to be very positive figures in the overall picture of complaints handled. You will see on screen an amount upheld per 100,000 residents. This is how the local government ombudsman compare local authorities directly in their data sets, and it is important to recognise that this figure is expressed as a rate per 100,000 residents for benchmarking purposes. Due to a low number of complaints investigated, 1 or 2 complaints can really impact these figures. Whilst Babergh sits higher than other Suffolk districts and boroughs this year, overall performance compared to other councils nationally is positive. On the screen are a few examples of improvements from learning from complaints and the introduction of some new processes. We have 2 dedicated complaints projects where we review complaints, outcomes and lessons learned. We ensure that these lessons learned are highlighted and improvements put in place to ensure that our services continue to improve. In the last 6 months, we have also made additional changes to the complaint system, so we are better able to understand the complaints that we receive. The introduction of root cause analysis into our projects will better help teams understand their complaints, and they will be able to identify trends when looking at complaints as a bigger picture rather than lessons from individual complaints. Based on the initial data that we have for 25-26, we are delighted that our lessons learned from complaints are having an impact on the volume of complaints received. Both Stage 1 and Stage 2 complaints received have reduced by around 15% year on year between the 1st of April and the 28th of January, and our average response time has also reduced. And finally, to give members more of an up-to-date oversight, next year's annual complaints report will be presented earlier in June. This earlier reporting timeline means the Ombudsman performance data won't be included in the June version as it is published later in the year, but we will ensure that the core service data remains current when it is scrutinised. And thank you for your time. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. We'll go into questions now. The first question I'd quite like to ask is, we split the different contacts we have with the council into comments, contact us, complaints and compliments. When we look at those, who makes the decision on whether the information coming in is a complaint or a compliment or a contact us? You could perhaps is there some sort of criteria that they have to fall in? Because a negative comment might be a complaint, but might go into that comments thing and not register as a complaint, if that makes sense.
So on our feedback system, the customer chooses whether they want to submit a compliment, comment or complaint. We do see negative comments at times, so this will ultimately be changed to a negative. I'm trying to spell complaint. But the contact us form, that's taken from our forms from our website, and so I don't know if Sam wants to take a little bit.
Yeah, so just to explain a bit more about the split, so James is completely right. So there are options for residents to log a comment, a compliment or a complaint, but we also have general inquiry contact forms on our website, so that if a resident, say, wanted to ask us a question, they can go through online and just submit an inquiry to whatever, I suppose, service that they think it relates to. If we believe that it is actually a complaint, as James said, it can then be added to the complaint system and then registered as a formal complaint. But the kind of contact us forms relates to those online inquiries forms that we receive from our website. So that's where a resident has selected they just want to ask us a question, and it's gone in through that mechanism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so if a resident made a complaint through Contact Us, that would definitely go through to and register as a complaint. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, okay, perfect. I'll go to the floor. Councillor Grandin.
Thank you. We've just had the housing debate and questions, but can you tell me how, there's a lot on housing in the complaints section. Can you tell me how those two systems work? Are they two completely separate things, or is the complaints about housing that we get in this paper separate from the complaints about housing that we heard earlier, please?
So in terms of our housing complaints, they are the same. So we would work with our housing colleagues to ensure that we are collectively reporting that performance, but there isn't a difference in terms of the report that you've heard. If complaints were discussed, then it is still about housing complaints that would also be reported through this particular paper as well.
Thank you. The paper says that the average stage 1 response time is down to 11.43 days over this year. So what is the goal? What is the aim or target you would like to get that down to in the end?
We'd like to bring it as low as possible. Our complaints policy states that we'll respond within 10 working days. Now, our complaints policy also allows for an extension of a further 10 working days at stage 1, so sometimes that figure can get expanded a little bit, because as you can see a number of complaints go beyond 10 days, and that's to ensure that we get the right resident and the right outcome for a resident, but ideally we'd like to bring it as low as possible, but while still providing a good feedback. Yes, is it?
So following on from that, when we respond, if someone goes on holiday and I email them, I get a response almost instantly saying, thank you, we've received your email. Is there more to the response than that? Or is it just acknowledgement that that you've received the message?
So are we talking about acknowledgement? Sorry, can I just check?
Yeah, so when you technically say you respond to something, do you actually deal with the issue in that response, or do you say we've registered it and we're looking into it?
Sorry, so thank you for clarifying that. So a response means a response to the full complaint, so you have to investigate the complaint and then formally respond to all of the areas within that complaint. The acknowledgement process is within 5 working days of the complaint taking place, and that would require the officer, who is the kind of complaint handler for that complaint, to reach out to the resident and introduce themselves, make sure that they have a clear understanding of the areas that they need to address within that complaint, just so that there's no surprises, if you will, when that response comes through at the 10 working day point. So that final response will be a final response to the complaint, rather than a holding message saying that unfortunately I'm on leave and I'll respond when I return. It is a full investigation and a response.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from councillors? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. In the report, there seem to be a number of complaints relating to inadequate contractor performance. Who oversees all that? I mean, it might be in a particular directorate, but surely as a council, who is monitoring the level of inadequate contractor performance?
So in terms of contractor performance, depending on where that contractor is providing services, so for example, if it's in waste or in housing, it would be the manager of that service who would be managing the contract, and therefore we would expect that KPIs and complaints are discussed as part of those contract reviews, and of course formal measures can be taken if improvements aren't seen, but it would be for the service to, I suppose, pick those up with their contractors themselves as part of that contract management process, if you will.
Thank you, Chair. Given the number of complaints to the local government ombudsman that resulted in compensation, where will we get the information? I mean, some said £100 here or £100 there, and there was some that there was no money disclosed at all. Where would we find the amount of money that was paid out in a year in compensation? Thank you.
So in terms of, for the local government ombudsman, all of that performance is recorded on their website, but I can tell you that it was just that £100, so you've not missed anything. It was just that one complaint for the local government ombudsman that attracted a £100 kind of goodwill payment, if you will, to the resident. But that is the only complaint that attracted compensation, if you will, within the year that reports into the local government ombudsman.
So the other compensation that was paid, because you see that, I think the council probably came to, is there no figures on those? They didn't disclose any level of compensation, but once or twice it wasn't the £100, it was just not disclosed that compensation was paid to a tenant.
Are we talking about tenant housing complaints at this point?
Well, some of it was about tenants.
Right, okay.
Poor performance or whatever.
So we don't currently report in our annual complaints report the levels of compensation, but I'm happy to take that away and look at it outside of the meeting, if that's okay, and see whether or not it's something we want to discuss moving forwards. In terms of the housing ombudsman, as part of their annual report, they do publish how much compensation they have suggested that we pay out. Any compensation, though, I want to be clear, is in line with our compensation policy for housing, which exists, so it's about making sure that it's in line with that policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scarf, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. One of our recommendations last year, and thank you for reporting back on our recommendations, was the implementation of a vulnerable persons policy, something I was particularly keen to see. It says this is being implemented at present, so the question is, do we know when that date will be, when that will actually be implemented, please? That's the first question.
I'm happy to take this one. So I just want to apologise that we were hoping to have launched it ahead of this point. We have been working really hard though on developing internal training for all officers though, to make sure that they really understand how to identify vulnerability, but also those kind of adjustments that might need to be made in terms of how you then support vulnerable residents. We have also been working with our housing colleagues to make sure that it's in line with regulatory kind of standards and best practice, as well as the housing ombudsman standards. So we are saying that it will be launched in March, and that's when we're looking to roll out the training and also the policy and some guidance online. It has just taken a while, just because we want to make sure that we're testing some of this work with our services across the organisation to ensure that everyone feels like they've had that opportunity to input, and also that we understand, I suppose, differences within services that might need to be taken into account within that policy and supplementary toolkit and the training that we've been developing.
Okay, thank you. Second question, if I may, Chair. I suppose it's really an observation and also a question. The appendices show us the stages of the complaints, various examples. One of the themes that comes out of that is poor record keeping and lack of communication. So my question would be, what have we done to address that? Because you've given us a good example of a range of cases. What have we done to address that particular issue now we know that that is a particular issue?
So in terms of record keeping, specifically, that has come out quite strongly when it's in regard to the housing ombudsman complaints that we've received. I'm sure David's covered in sort of previous sessions, but we have implemented a sort of CRM system within our housing management system, which allows customer services, housing officers, everyone to sort of log interactions with our tenants and make sure that there is that kind of single source of truth, I kind of want to say, so that everyone has that visibility as to what's happening for that particular tenant. So I know that in customer services specifically, we've given lots of training, we do spot checks and we monitor to make sure that people are using the CRM, and I know it's something that we are continuously working on, just to make sure that we have got that single record for a tenant, so that we can improve and learn using our complaint responses.
I'll just add to that as well. Next month you'll be receiving a report from our tenant board again about communication, and as part of that communication they have looked at the CRM records, and we'll be making some recommendations on the back of that as well. So.
if I could just come back on that then, without going into a specific case, which I know is now currently a complaint, it did appear to me that there was a lack of communication, between contractors or our own staff and the tenant, and actually particularly between our own department and the councillor, myself. So I would be really interested, and I've spoken to David about the particular case, in seeing how that's dealt with, because I'm sure that's going to come through in next year's report, and would really, emphasise that it's really important communication, keeping everyone informed, because it is the lack of communication sometimes, inadvertently, I accept, that frustrates both residents and councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carruthers with the question.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor McLaren's comments about compensation, I was wondering, is there a pot of money put aside for compensation? You mentioned the compensation policy for housing, so I'm assuming in housing there's money put aside. And is that the case for general complaints if people get compensation? Thank you. Just wondering.
Yeah, so we do have a budget which is for housing compensation, but it's also for disrepair compensation as well, because obviously, tenants are able to take us to court basically for not providing repair services. So yes, we do have a budget, and it's usually based on kind of what we paid out last year. Disrepair cases and compensation across housing in general has reduced, as you would expect, with complaints reducing in the repairs team and the service improving. So yes, it's really positive performance, but obviously, and sometimes it's the compensation is about recognising sometimes that we don't get it right all the time, and the impact that can have on somebody. We, as Sam said, we have a specific compensation policy for housing tenants, which helps as a guide for officers when making those decisions. So we do take into consideration, for example, things like the time, trouble, distress, things like that might have been caused, so it doesn't necessarily just have to be a demonstrable financial loss, for example. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, we do have a budget, in short.
And what about if the complaint isn't about housing? Because there is one example in here where it isn't about housing.
So in terms of wider compensation for services, it's very rare for us to pay compensation, if you will, to residents. And looking across Suffolk and wider, not many local authorities, if any, have any compensation policies outside of housing compensation, because it is quite an unusual remedy to a complaint. So it's not something we look at as a kind of a remedy in the round usually, but it would be looked at on a case-by-case basis if that was deemed necessary.
Yeah, I think Sam touched on the closure times earlier. If you have a complaint that the green area outside hasn't been cut, or the pothole in the car park, there is one, is the closure time when that pothole is repaired or that grass is cut, or is that closure time is when you've responded to the complaint and that complaint, from your point of view, is closed, but the remedy to their complaint hasn't been actioned or actually taken into effect?
So I'll take that one. So it's from when we respond to the complaint is the deadline given. The response to complaints will, if there are any outstanding action, we'll detail that back to the customer in our response time, and those reports, we can close complaints on our complaint system with outstanding actions. So on the complaint system, it will still show if there are outstanding actions. It will still be at the top of their dashboard that some items need to be done. But the actual response time is from when the complaint is responded to.
So do we ever get a second complaint about the same as the first complaint? Do we ever get a second complaint following up their first complaint because that action hasn't been taken?
Yeah, we do on occasion to get those. I'll invest that couple sometimes come through to me is the officer that responds to stage 2 complaints. And so we do get stage 2 complaints out of ones that haven't been dealt with appropriately at stage 1.
Another point, one of the biggest increases was waste. Now we all know this year we've got a huge change coming to our waste disposal for all our residents. Now we've seen an increase this year on the current waste streams. Are we expecting an even bigger increase this coming year? And what measures are we putting in place to deal with those should they come forward? Because I can see that our residents will be contacting us fairly often about the new waste streams and how it affects them. How are we planning to deal with that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Clearly there is a massive change coming. There is a lot of publicity going on around that. This week we're delivering the Mid-Suffolk magazine in the Mid-Suffolk area, which has a lot of information on the waste changes. The Suffolk Waste Partnership also has a comprehensive kind of programme of comms around it. We know that there is going to be, some confusion in people's minds about how this new system is going to work, and we're obviously doing all we can to make sure that we're giving out the correct information. I understand we're also taking on some extra staff in the waste team to answer the phones, and when we get to a certain point after a wait time on that line, it does default to the main switchboard, and we're having extra staff on that as well. So I think we're doing all that we can to try and reassure people, but we know that a big change like this, which affects every household, is going to take some while to settle down.
Just to add to that, of course it is about the information. This would probably fall more into the category of giving advice and information to residents rather than formally acknowledging it as a complaint, because people are getting used to a new system. And that happens every time you introduce anything a little bit new. So I don't think it would be fair to categorise such queries instantly as complaints. I think that would be incorrect. However, were we not to respond and give that information, then yes, that could be the case. But for the moment, I think it's just a matter of telling people what's happening, making sure it's explained. The publicity campaign is going to be extensive. You're not going to be able to miss this.
So are you saying we won't be registering complaints in the same way that we currently do because of the new waste streams if they're regarding waste? We are going to be more tolerant and perhaps not register them as a pure complaint.
I wouldn't say more tolerant, but I would say, for example, where it's clear that there's a misunderstanding. And of course, if there are people who have objection to the very system being introduced in the first place, well, that's not our doing. That is actually national policy, and we have no choice but to do this. So if somebody complains that we shouldn't be collecting the extra bin or we shouldn't be collecting food waste, well, that would hardly be fair to regard that as a pure complaint. It's not something we can change. So I think we just have to wait and see as the things settle down. And imagine that there are going to be some judgments made. Sam and the team will obviously be aware of that. There's a very sympathetic approach taken through our customer services team, and it is a matter of explaining things to people.
Thank you. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. I always like to look at root causes. It's definitely all very well and good assessing how we handle complaints and how we review them and log them. Okay, that's that's understandable that we need to scrutinise that. But I think I would like to sort of delve into the root causes of why we actually have the complaints in the first place. Because obviously, if you can nip those in the bud, then we're dealing with less complaints, aren't we? And then we free up staff hours and resource. So that's really what we should be, I think, focusing in on as a scrutiny committee. So this is a question. Well, David's running off. I've got a question for him. Sorry. I can wait. Well, it's a quick one for you, really. I'll probably go all around the houses, and it will take you 10 seconds. So our biggest complaint seems to be housing. okay? And then when you delve into that a little bit further, root causes, well, actually, a lot of those complaints are about our interaction with our tenants, okay? So I guess my question to David is that when is this portal coming in, and does he think that with the increased communication that will bring, this will actually reduce complaints? Because a lot of them are essentially about, you know, the gas engineer coming and no one really knew about it, and then, okay, so they put in a complaint. So it seems like we could absolutely nip in the bud one of our biggest complaints that could be solved potentially by better communication, and especially when this portal is coming in. So are we pressing the software engineers on that to actually speed this up and get this in place? So that's my question to you, David. Sorry, you can go off and do your bits of it.
I mean, we are pressing them as much as we possibly can. Obviously, you know, we're just one voice in a load of voices. But as I think I explained earlier in the Council House Insurance Report session, other clients of Total Mobile have also commented the same. I don't feel like though that's not going to, it's not going to be a silver bullet having that portal, because that won't necessarily solve all the communication issues. So if our contractors aren't onboarded onto Total Mobile, for example, and we're managing them outside of Total Mobile, then they won't, that won't be giving our tenants an update on as to where they are. It is communication or lack thereof, and the record keeping thing has been a consistent theme of complaints for housing. We have our housing complaints task force that meets quarterly. And as part of that, we look at what the themes are from the previous quarter. We have just introduced a lessons learned log, because whilst we were using that complaints task force to talk about lessons learned, we realised that actually, well, we're not keeping a record of that anywhere, and how do we hold service areas to account? So, for example, the example you used around the gas contractor, you know, one of the things that the gas contract manager will need to be doing is raising this at the contract management meeting. You can't just turn up to our tenants' homes without making appointments, for example, and then expect them, and then wonder why they're not in. We are now, as part of the complaints task force, we're asking people to actually document what they're going to be doing as a result of the feedback that they're getting, and then also providing us evidence with that. So I've been quite clear that I want to see a copy of the minutes from that contract manager meeting, where you discussed the complaint themes for that given quarter. This is also something that the Ombudsman will be expecting us, and the regulator will be expecting us to show them as well, that we are learning from complaints, we are listening to our tenants' feedback. You know, tenant feedback isn't just about tenant engagement, it's about everything. We've got a wealth of information without tenant engagement even, that we can use to improve services. So hopefully that partly answers the question, as I said, but I don't think the portal itself is going to solve that problem, if I'm being honest. It's more around giving our tenants another option and another opportunity of logging their repair.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just follow up. So I guess, like, you know, the Total Mobile, so we're saying we don't like their system, other authorities and organisations don't like their system. So I guess it would be sort of then prudent to ask the follow-up question of, are there other councils that have got a better system, and have we looked into kind of better systems? I understand we may be contractually obliged to stay with their system, but if they aren't providing us the level of service that we require to kind of, you know, get our systems better, I imagine there's a contract clause where we can kind of get out of it and maybe go to a different provider to get this, because this trend is looking to me that it's orientated around housing, and a lot of it is about essentially poor communication from us. So if we can just improve that, because I think what people are doing is, rather than, because they don't get the communication from us, they use the complaints process essentially to communicate with us. So if we've got better communication, we reduce complaints. Now, I know the volume of traffic coming in wouldn't reduce because you've still got that same thing coming in, but at least it reduced, you know, increased communication essentially reduces complaints. So, you know, have we looked at a different provider?
So we with our housing management system, for example, which is our tenancy management system, which is separate from Total Mobile Connect, there is also a tenant portal within that where you can go on, check your rent, you know, things like that, which we do use. It's not great, again. The problem with the Total Mobile Connect thing is the rest of the system's brilliant, and it gives us exactly what we need. It does that dynamic scheduling. In my opinion, the only weakness of that system is its tenant portal. I don't think that's enough necessarily to warrant re-procuring a new system, implementing that, because it took us nearly 12 months to implement it the first time, so we'd have to start that whole process again. So yeah, I think, you know, some organisations, they will have like an app of some sort, you know, that has been developed, and that's not something that, you know, I think we might have looked at it in the past, but we don't have that on our plans of things to do. Yeah, I think I would also argue as well that the complaints is not necessarily being used as a route to tell us about something necessarily, because if it's the first time that we've ever heard about this particular inquiry, we wouldn't consider that to be a complaint. We would consider that to be a request for service. We would only treat it as a complaint if it's an expression of dissatisfaction about a service or lack thereof that our tenants have received. So yeah, a complaint is just that, but I don't think if somebody's using the complaint service to raise it, we would say that's not a complaint because you never told us about it before. You've got to give us a chance to sort it out first. But yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely, you know, it would be an app of some sort, or some sort of, yeah, all singing, all dancing portal would be great, but I'm not sure that we've got the, yeah, I'm not sure that that's something that we would necessarily prioritise looking at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned earlier that once a complaint comes in, you pass it on to the relevant operations team, housing team, whoever, you then mark it as responded and effectively close it and put it in to be actioned. So after that, is it then the complaint team's responsibility to follow that up to make sure it is actioned? And if so, how long do you give it, and what powers have you got if something's just sitting there not moving?
Sorry, is that about big complaint outcomes I spoke about earlier? I'm deaf in one ear.
Oh, right, so complaint outcomes, yeah. So when complaint's been moved on from the complaints team to a relevant department.
So the relevant department respond to the stage 1 complaint. It's the manager of that team that provides a response to that complaint, and so through the outcomes and through the processes in place, they can track what steps that they need to take to ensure that those issues are resolved. The Housing Ombudsman guidance, especially the housing, says we respond when we know what the issue is, not necessarily once the issue's been resolved, because some of these issues can take a very long time to get sorted. So it will then be on that team to implement their next steps as part of their processes. We will also then sort of track, as we've been talking about, lessons learned and outcomes to complaints through task force, and when complaints come through to stage 2, we can identify where those failures were in stage 1 and part of our complaints process, and once again use those lessons learned to feed back to the teams.
So it's not your responsibility to, as a complaints team, to keep an eye on the job and chase it up if need be?
Oh, do you want me to answer that? Yeah, so I think what we've been describing is those kind of actions that you can log on the system, and they will generate a sort of reminder, if you will, for those teams to follow up on. What we would be doing is we wouldn't be able to necessarily, when we say complaints team, I think James is our complaints officer, just to be clear for the council. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to chase, you know, every single action up individually. What we would do is during those task force meetings, during those quarterly meetings with services, we would discuss any outstanding actions and ensure that they have been I suppose, remedied at that point, rather than sort of sending lots of emails saying, have you resolved this matter, have you resolved that matter? So absolutely we will chase it up, but we will do that as part of our kind of ongoing complaints monitoring. So looking at kind of outstanding complaints, anything that's been responded to out of time, and also those kind of outstanding actions as well. But that would be looked at within those kind of task force and complaints group meetings. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of questions that can probably have very quick answers. The first one is, when someone makes a complaint, are they able to upload a video to go with that complaint to help direct?
I think videos, yes, and there's all sort of attachments, so photos, emails, videos. If they tell us that they can't, if there isn't a supported file, I believe all file types are predominantly supported, but we can take that, we can direct them to the relevant inbox to send that to, and then we can upload it to their complaint on their behalf.
Yeah, perfect. And the other thing is, when you get complaints in different departments, would the portfolio holder be given, would they be sent those complaints so they can see what's happening in their department? Maybe the stage 2. I'm sure they see ombudsman complaints.
I think it's something we just need to explore a bit further, just because sending individual complaints, there's a level of kind of GDPR that we'd need to consider around consent from that individual to share it with somebody outside of the person responding to the complaints. But I'd be very happy to take that away and see if there's some way that we could build it in to our complaint system to seek that consent to be able to share information with portfolio holders, if that's something that they would particularly like to see.
Okay. Councillor McCraw?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often that a portfolio holder directly gets involved in a single complaint, but it does happen. And it's happened in this portfolio where I've liaised with the holder of another portfolio, and in this particular instance it was actually a cross-council query which covered a different authority in a different part of the country, and it was related to council tax and a variety. So we all worked together, pulled it together with the officers, and managed to find a solution by working with I think in this instance it was the Shared Revenues Partnership, and it was about second homes premiums, and it was a very peculiar case, but everybody was kept informed, and the complainant was provided with an answer and I think a satisfactory outcome. So effectively, but these are very much individual cases. So I hope that answers the question. But portfolio holders, by and large, will not become involved with individual complaints unless perhaps they're involved as a ward member, by a direct email, or just because somebody's contacted them as the cabinet member. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go into debate now. One more question, yeah?
Quick one. Social media, the dreaded Facebook. I think I asked this one last year. So if we put a post on and someone puts a comment on which essentially would transpire to be a complaint, as in, you haven't mowed the grass here, you've left this here. Do we treat that as a complaint, or does it have to then go through the official channels? Because for some people, they might consider the fact that because they've put this kind of complaint problem on there, and like maybe we've responded to it or not, they might treat that as a complaint with a response. So I guess where's our standpoint with the social media?
To clarify, you mean on the Mid-Suffolk social media page?
Yeah, when we put things out, yeah, because obviously we're in control of that, we can log that.
Yeah, okay.
So in terms of social media complaints, we can absolutely log those if a resident wishes to. So we would usually have a direct messaging conversation with them first, just because often, like you say, it might be something that's quite simply resolved, and actually a comment back will perfectly resolve that situation. But if it's something a bit more complex and actually it's quite it's perhaps related to a matter that we might need to investigate and just understand a bit more deeply, then we absolutely would then log that on the complaint system and make sure that the resident was number one okay that we were doing that, and also that they would then receive a formal response. And we have done that on occasions where there are it's potentially a bigger kind of issue that we just need to explore more as a formal complaint.
Right, okay, we'll go into debate on that one. Thank you for those questions. I was impressed by this complaints report. I especially like the appendix that gives you the cases and the complaints and the compliments and things. And I think there's a real, you said we did culture in complaints. Like, you know, we've listened to you and we've done this, policy's changed in this way, and it's all in there, and it's a really good way of doing it. I think, oh, sorry. It's not a phone call, that's an alarm, but so it does make it, I think it makes a massive difference to people. I think we're getting back to people. We're explaining, as long as we're explaining those delays, I think people will accept them. This is something I said in the pre-meeting. I think it's when they don't hear anything, when we don't get back to them, that we've got problems, and that's when that's when people start, you know, getting frustrated with things. I think with complaints, the better you are at complaints, the more people can access your complaints, and the more likely you are to get footfall through that complaint. And I think an absolutely terrible council might not get many complaints because people have just given up. People are like, they're not going to listen. They don't, you know, I've complained before and I've got nothing. I'm just going to give up and accept that's the way things are. And I don't think we do that at all. I think we're really good at this. When we're looking at waste contracts and things, if we're going to look at the complaints coming in, I think we need to categorise them, but still record them. I know you haven't said that that's not what we're going to do, but I think we've got to be careful that we don't say, this is teething problems, we won't add those complaints. We just put them in a different place and we say, look, these are expected complaints that are coming in because there's a massive change of service, and we're always going to get it. But the thing that occurred to me with the recommendation is that I think as a portfolio holder for complaints in your department, whether redacted or otherwise, you should at least see what's going on. I'm a bit worried that the Scrutiny Committee might see more of the complaints in housing than the portfolio holder does. And then I think it might not be, I'm not necessarily saying get involved, but just to be aware of what those issues are. So that's a recommendation that I'm quite interested in going forward. But I'll go to the floor. Would anyone like to speak on this? Councillor Patchett?
Yeah, go on then. So, yeah, I think literally, like I said before, the absolute best way to deal with complaints is to not have the complaint in the first place. It's the like the crux of risk mitigation. You delete the risk. So looking through this document, there's like one word that crops up all the time, and it's communication. Poor communication, lack of communication, across all departments. So I think that is what we kind of got to focus on is, so I guess there's a couple of factors, isn't it? It's yes, how do you deal with complaints and process them? That's one factor, but how do you not get the complaints in the first place? That's the position where you want to be, really. And I think that not getting rid of, but significantly reducing complaints can derive from better communication across sort of different media. I think if we can get this portal cracked, that will help. Or do we need to put more resource into essentially other departments? Maybe, you know, do they have like a specific person in that department for communication that essentially, handles the front end of maybe they're not the caseworker on a particular issue, whether, you know, housing planning, but are they just like the communications front end, and that can sort of absolutely, you know, I'll take your case, I'll handle it, I'll get someone to respond to you. But I think it does seem that communication is just, it's across all departments. So if we can nip that in the bud, if we can improve that, we'll reduce our overall complaints, and that's a position that I think we want to be in, really, as a council. less complaints.
Yeah, I totally agree. I sort of jotted down a few things here, and there's especially with housing, repairs not completed, wrong parts, return visit, diagnosing problems, and missed appointments, and that's all communication. I know you're dealing with the public, and in the private sector it's exactly the same. People don't turn up for dentist appointments, and people aren't in when someone goes to fix their boiler in the private world. So it is very difficult, but I totally agree with that. This communication is key, which I think everybody knows. Anyone else? Councillor Holt.
Yeah, just picking up on what you said, Chair, about the waste. I think it is important that we try and break down any complaints and contact re-waste moving forward, because I think as a scrutiny committee as well, the waste introduction of new streams is something that we may well want to look at as a separate issue. And I think if you've got that information from the onset, it's something that could feed into any future ONS meetings that we have regarding the new waste introduction. So I would sort of recommend that we put that in place so that we can cope with that, because I think we all expect to see an increase in contact.
Thank you. Also, do we want to keep track in this of the contractors that create the most complaints? Do we need something where we say there's a lot of complaints coming out of certain teams, or I'm sure that's handled further up, but I don't know if that's something the committee would like to look at. It might even be something for the portfolio holders if they refer them to them, but just an observation, because that was mentioned. Any other recommendations? Are we ready to read out what we've got? Are you ready to read out what we've got? Okay. I won't attempt to fill the silence with talking to the... I think everybody will be quite glad if I stay quiet, which is what I ended up doing anyway.
Thank you, Chair. So I have 3 recommendations. I have 2 that are just taken from the main body of the report, and 1 that I've fleshed out based on what Councillor Holt has said. So recommendation 1, that the committee notes the annual complaints report for 24-25, as well as the actions underway to strengthen complaint handling and service improvement in line with Ombudsman requirements. Recommendation 2, that the Cabinet members for Performance and Resilience seek to improve communication with residents to both reduce the number of complaints submitted as well as support residents through the complaints process. Picking up Councillor Patchett's point. Recommendation 3, that data on complaints and feedback relating to the better recycling waste changes are incorporated into a future review of the changes by the Review and Scrutiny Committee, which picks up Councillor Holt's point. Thank you, Chair.
A show of hands.
Yep, happy to do a show of hands.
And then, yeah. Is everyone happy with those recommendations? Unanimous, carried.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Thank you all for attending today. That's great. We'll feel free to leave, slip out now, because we've just got a couple more items on there, and but yeah, thank you. So we'll go on to item 11, forthcoming decision list. Do members have any comments on that? Does everyone need a minute just to go over it? Councillor Jameson.
Only one thing. I noticed that for Babergh this is, not for a joint, they're reviewing the strategy for Bellevue, and I just wondered I'm not sure what that means by the reviewing the strategy. I know they've got problems with the CAF, but I mean, is that something we need to look at, or I don't know. There's not a lot of time. It's the 10th anyway. But.
I don't mind taking that one, Rob. So that is currently on the forthcoming decision list for the Cabinet meeting of the 10th of March. There's not any time for us to scrutinise that ahead of that decision going to Cabinet, but if that is something that we would like to look at as a topic going forward, regardless of whether there's a decision being made or not, that is something that we could probably discuss outside of a meeting and get scheduled. Thank you.
Sorry, I haven't got my microphone on. We've actually discussed, for those of you that weren't in the meeting, meeting we had when we didn't have a scrutiny committee meeting. We decided that portfolio holders would go to cabinet meetings and push some of these recommendations that are still read or not completed. So we're going to do that. We've got the green light to do that. We're going to bring that in as soon as I can't remember exactly what the criteria we said for that was, but when we've got statuses that are a year old, you know, we just need to do something about that. Even if we go to a cabinet and the cabinet meeting and just say it out loud at the cabinet meeting, just to make sure that it's been said and it's not been ignored. We've got 15th of the 7th, 2024 down at the bottom with the West Suffolk Safety Partnership. But I think Cabinet need to hear about these recommendations that haven't been replied to. So yeah, just to keep you up to speed on that. Any other comments on that? Councillor Holt.
Yeah, on the 20th of November, we put in a recommendation that we would have some feedback on the new waste streams within 3 months. We're sort of 3 months there, but I just want to know if we can, perhaps as chairs, and work with Alicia to try and get something back to us. So I think as a committee, joint committee, we're all conscious that with this big implementation coming in, that we need to keep an eye on it and make sure that any issues that we find are certainly highlighted and can be referred.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree.
Good news, that information is actually in my inbox, so I will be circulating it to members after the committee meeting today. It got sent through to me last week, but I didn't want to send it ahead of this meeting in case it caused confusion about what was on the agenda, so I'll be sending it around later today.
They weren't watching then and decided to ping it across when
quickly.
Councillor Holt brought it up.
So yeah, no worries.
So that's for noting. We'll go into item 13, the Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Work Plan. Any comments? I'll just give you a minute.
No, so the work plan only goes up to April at the moment. I could probably do an addition for May, to be really honest. So I'll sneak that onto the onto the work plan. But in April, May time, we'll start to think about the work plan for 26-27, and then we'll have a full work plan from May onwards, coming through on the agendas from that point. So at the moment, it looks like we're not having a meeting in March, although I just have to get confirmation as to whether an item is coming forward or not. But I'll let the committee know in due course. So it looks like the next meeting will be on the 13th of April.
I'm afraid it doesn't always mean that there'll be a low workload, because quite often as soon as we tip over, we suddenly have a job fitting everything in, and we have to manage the workload quite hard after that. But yeah, noted. Councillor Wyman.
Thanks, Chair. Sifco for June.
Sifco is at some point, and I can check it for you now. I don't have it in my brain to hand. So.
It's cyclic though, isn't it? So it will be it will be on there.
So, yeah, I checked with the director, and we've actually moved it to July, based on feedback from officers about when that goes into their schedules. I think it's going to be going to Cabinet and Council later than has been in previous years, so we might as well keep it all contained in a row, so coming in July.
Right, okay, thank you. That's for noting. So we'll do item 14, the Mid-Suffolk Avian Scrutiny Work Plan. Any comments? And that's for noting as well. So thank you very much. I'm afraid it's 1:15, so we have overrun a little bit. But thank you, that was a really good meeting, and I'll see you at the next Avian Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 16th of March at 10 o'clock. Well, we'll have a pre-meeting again, I assume. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and have a good day.